Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Ignash Brodsky.
I'm Steven Zuber.
I'm Jay Sticky.
And I don't know what we're talking about today. Actually, that's a lie because they have told me. But this was one of the rare episodes where I just sat back and said, okay, you guys do everything because I'm really busy this week. And you guys did. So thank you very much.
Oh, anytime.
Or at least Steven did.
That's true. Well, I have no idea. I'm just going to say you guys because thanks, Steven.
Well, I mean, I was going to save that to the end and be like, hey, did this feel more or less organized than usual? Because usually Ignash kind of puts together a note doc and stuff. But
do I?
Yeah, I mean, usually.
Okay.
Well, I tell you what, some notes appear every 2 weeks. Not every so.
All right.
Maybe you do it in your sleep or something.
I don't consider myself that organized, but I do sometimes, I guess, put together notes. But before we do all that, we're going to talk about the sequences like we always do.
Usually, except last week.
Like we almost always do.
Almost always.
Very, very usually.
Yeah.
Is very usually a thing?
Sure.
Okay.
It is now.
All right. And our first post is self-anchoring.
So, in a sentence, this is the tendency for people to, when modeling another mind, basically use your mind and put yourself in their shoes, right?
Yes.
As best you can.
Yeah.
Which Eliezer's day job is making minds from scratch, so that's not a good base spot for him. But for most of us, almost all of our interactions, it's not a bad place to be.
Yeah.
It's kind of the best. It's also the best we have.
Yeah, there's not really any other way, I think. Like, you know what your own mind is like. You don't know what other people's minds are like, you can guess. I've often wondered, though, like, if there was some way to telepathically just link yourself to some other mind, would it be just wildly different from the way your mind works and thinks? Or would it be, like, pretty comfortable?
I have 2 predictions.
Hmm.
1, we will be able to do that in the next 50 years.
Can't wait.
And 2, we will not be, like, bowled over by how different other people's brains are. I think that they will be similar enough to ours to at least be recognizable.
I think it's going to be a matter of culture. Like, the more similarly you were raised but to other people in the same general, like, area and milieu, they're going to be very similar, even if you have wildly different opinions. But, like, people on the other side of the globe raised in a totally different culture and different circumstances, I think might be, like, radically different.
My prediction would be that, like, I think just sort of the average person will probably feel pretty similar to the average person, but I bet there's going to be crazy outliers there. Just based on some people I know who I like most people, once I talk to them for a bit, I can start to model them and predict sort of the kinds of things that they might want to talk about, what they might say next, There's some people I've met, though, that, like, I was talking about sort of that there's a ex-boyfriend of a friend of mine and Phoenix's who I was just like, we spent like a week hanging out with these two and I could not predict what this guy was going to do or say next, and it actually kind of bothered me. Like,
Yeah, that's scary. You don't want humans that you can't predict.
Unpredictable people. Yeah.
I think I would have a hard time. Like, I've met some super hippie people, like the kind that you think about only show up in movies and stuff, right? And I just have a hard time really grokking what being them must be like. Like, it almost feels like a different neuroarchitecture.
Okay, then I will refine my prediction to say that it'll be easier to relate to those people than it will be to your pet dog.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, so that's a way broader, maybe less refined prediction. But, like, I think that for the most part, our modeling of other people based on our own selves is going to be close enough most of the time, right? And it's because we all do basically have the same neural architecture.
Yeah.
Like I said, it might be interesting seeing the order of which thoughts appear from people in different cultures, right?
Yeah.
Like, the first thing might be like, oh, wait, what about my culture? What about my family? What about my community? Whereas other people might be like, wait, what about me? What about my personal safety?
Americans. What about my freedom?
Well, and I wasn't even elevating one over the other. I was just like,
yeah, no, I get you.
But yeah, totally. Some people would be, but my freedoms, and other people would be, but my family's reputation or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
that's just differences in what you value, I guess. What's important to you?
Yeah. So, like, those thoughts, I think, will then cascade to, like, the rest of the decision, of how to go about the rest of the conversation or solve the problem. But maybe the real fun thing will be, like Jay said, people at the tips of the at the tips of the distributions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I'm mind melding with an emulation of, like, Elon Musk's brain, right?
See, I don't think Elon Musk's brain would be that hard to figure out. I think he's mostly someone who's very curious, very energetic, and very healthy. And, like, that's not that hard for me to model.
I think he's also neuroatypical, which would be interesting to engage with as well. As he said during his SNL monologue. He's the first person with Asperger's to host, or at least the first person with Asperger's to admit it.
Right.
He was actually really funny. Did I already rave about that?
You did,
did.
but not on mic.
Oh yeah, it was awesome. Like SNL does this thing where they can bring on really great people, and then like the show kind of sucks. I think the week before him was Keegan-Michael Key.
Oh,
That episode sucked.
really?
They didn't put him in any good sketches,
Well, that sucks.
and so like that's really what makes or breaks it.
One of the first episodes that had Jim Carrey on it was fucking amazing because you could tell like he jumped into every episode and was just putting his comedic genius to work, and it was great. I would have thought that he would have done the same thing.
I would have thought so too. It was one of the worst episodes of the season.
Damn.
It might, I don't know, be like sort of a matter of how outgoing the actual comic is. Like a lot of comedians are actually pretty introverted. And
But even Keegan, he's got a long background in sketch comedy.
yeah,
It's
Yeah.
and then the season finale was I can't remember her name, the Queen's Gambit actress.
Okay.
Hers was amazing, and I wouldn't think of her as a comedic like mastermind, but it was hilarious. It was a great episode. Anyway, modeling other minds is tight, and this is basically that. Talks about between ages of 3 and 4 people, human people.
I think we talked about this last episode, right? The whole theory of mind developing about at it like between age 3 and 4, where
Yeah.
kids are able to kind of put themselves in the shoes of another kid that they're watching on TV. Like,
This is
What does Sally think is in the box? Pencils or candy?
Yeah.
Because you saw her see candy be put in the box, and then she left, and someone came and replaced it with pencils, and then Sally comes back,
Yeah.
and then they ask the kid, "What does she think is in there?" Before they get a good theory of mind, they'll say, "Well, obviously pencils, because that's what's in the box." But it's like once you realize, no, wait, she wasn't in the room when they switched it out. That's kind of that self-reflective bit that aware bit that more sapient.
that most people
Things
learn at
do.
age 3 or 4, but some people I think never seem to quite get.
It's a really short post. I think the key thing from this post is that two people see basically the same layout, but one of them can see 3 candles, and the other one has the smallest candle blocked, so they can't see it. And the person who can't see the smallest candle tells the other subject to move the small candle from one place to another. And the person who can see all 3 candles and sees there's one even smaller, their eyes always go first to the smallest candle before they quickly adjust to the medium-sized candle, which they know is the smallest one the other person can see. And that's not the test. Like, the test is obviously, if you aren't a 4-year-old, you know the other person can't see the smallest candle, so you're going to move the medium one. But what Eliezer says is the interesting thing is, reflexively, they always go to the smallest candle first and then adjust, which means that everyone has a bit of anchoring. We spoke about anchoring before, like several months ago at this point, where if you're given a high number just at random, you will anchor on that higher number and give higher estimates for things that you have absolutely no idea about just because you were already primed with a higher number. And so he says this is an example of like all people anchor on themselves first and then adjust afterwards. And due to the nature of anchoring, it's very rare for people to adjust enough.
It makes sense because we literally don't know what other people's brains are like. So we do kind of have to start with, you need some model. Here's the one that I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
And then, then I'll add like a sort of simulation of the other person's brain state based on the facts that I've known about them, the ways that I've seen them interact, etc.
Yeah. I think anchoring has some of the replication issues, but this doesn't strike me as the same kind of anchoring. And if anything, this might just also
I think that's actually priming, and that's like in the social sciences, the whole like, if you give a group of men and women a math test and prime it by like, men do better on this test than supposedly women do worse. I think that did not replicate.
Oh, this is actually one of the things I did a small version of when I was doing boring psych studies in college. Stereotype threat.
Right.
Was that example. I mean, the other like some weird priming is like, hey, my screensaver is money, and you see like a dollar bill, you're less inclined to give money or something. Like all those sound the eye roll is appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
These were like, oh look, it's really easy to prime people on certain things and get certain reactions, but that turned out to not really be the case.
It sounds like just an overly simplistic way of thinking about humans. Like we actually are pretty sophisticated at doing this for the most part.
Did we mention what one of the easiest ways to predict if something is going to replicate or not is?
If it just smells like bullshit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was basically, if you ask a random subset of people, does this smell like bullshit? And the majority of them say yes, it probably won't replicate. It was a very high correlation.
Wisdom of crowds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that for social science, that definitely sounds true, right?
Yeah.
The average person, if they didn't teach evolution, if you ask them, are you related to bananas? They would say, what the fuck are you talking about?
Right.
But
this brings us to the next post already. But yeah,
right, yeah. but with social science, we all have some intuition of social science,
and we all have a lot of experience with other humans.
Right.
I think is part of the thing that helps with that. Whereas very few people have experience with evolution.
Right. That's not to say that you can't get a surprising finding that no, actually, it turns out forget what you thought you knew. This is actually the way people's brains work.
Yeah.
But I was going to mention
less common, I think, than people trying to generate sensationalist articles.
Right. I was wondering too with this one. I mean, so my eyes, I'm told, move the smallest candle to the next to the truck in this little experiment, right? There's pictures in the article. I don't know how much it is that I'm modeling so I look at the smallest candle first. That's the finding, right? And then I adjust. I'm like, oh wait, no, the smallest candle the director can see. Yeah. But I don't know how much that is of me anchoring or me just he said smallest candle and just look for the smallest candle, right?
Right.
And then, so I would want other ways to test this.
I think that's arguably just anchoring on your own perception there. It's kind of the same thing. You could say, I'm first jumping to, I, Stephen, believe that this is the smallest candle. Or you could just hear them say the word smallest candle and then
start scanning for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think still, that's your brain.
Yeah, I think the key thing here is how it interacts with anchoring from before. Whereas once you're anchored to something, you're going to be always systematically slightly biased towards the thing you were anchored. So everyone's going to have a little bit of bias towards everyone else, thinking that they're more like them more like themselves than they really are.
Yeah, it ends with a nice quote that I like. We can put our feet in other minds' shoes, but we keep our own socks on. This actually ties well into the next post, expecting short inferential distances, which is
almost like he laid them out in this order on purpose.
I know. This is one of the ones that I never forgot.
Yeah, this is a fantastic one.
Yeah.
And there is an audio version of this. I believe it was Why We Cur that paid me to make an audio version of it. So
delightful.
Everyone can hear that.
Yeah, if you want to hear Inuyasha's voice.
Who doesn't? Yeah, I mean, on a meta note, this is one of my favorites, and I think it comes up for me basically daily.
Really?
I mean, at least a few times a week.
I mean, I'm assuming largely in the workplace?
Largely in the workplace, but even outside of that, any conversation with somebody who, my wife isn't super into all this rationalist stuff. And so when I come home from doing these, she's like, oh, so what'd you guys talk about? And I have to think of where to start. And it's fun. It's great. And I think that if people pay attention to their own interactions with people when they're explaining stuff, I think they'll find themselves noticing this more often. I'm guessing.
Okay.
But
actually, there's some autistic people that are super bad at this, and it's really cute. I was hanging out with Gray yesterday, and there were a bunch of times where Gray would just start talking about rifles and bullet calibers and things, excited, oh yeah, well there's this thing, and I was just I have no idea what you're talking about, man. go back to explaining Guns 101, and then we'll go from there.
So first you get a metal tube, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, that's not a bad place to start. I still don't know. I mean, I know that higher caliber means either bigger bullet or faster bullet. I think those two things probably correlate. But I don't know. I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is the kind of thing that so the point of the post is when you're entrenched with knowledge on something and you're explaining it to somebody else, it's not impossible, but you have to be very, very careful and work hard to actually convey what you're talking about successfully.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about it on terms you understand, but they don't understand the terms.
Can we give the hunter-gatherer background? Because I find it super interesting. He points out that
psych.
Yes, that in the evolutionary environment, we lived in bands of at most 200 people with no writing. And so all knowledge was passed down by speech and memory. And so any knowledge that wasn't explicitly private knowledge that you were not sharing for whatever reasons you have was just public knowledge, period. There were no domains of specialization or wherever. And so at most, anyone was ever one inferential step away from you. If you had knowledge of where an oasis was, you could just tell someone that. You wouldn't have to explain the concept of an oasis to them first, or the concept of standing water or something.
Right.
Whereas now we have vast differences between what people know that often take, I don't want to say many years of research because that seems like an exaggeration sometimes.
No, I think it's not. I mean, if you have a degree in, I don't know, if you have a doctorate and you're trying to explain, I don't know.
I agree, but I don't think any
thing that
doctorate...
I just forgot the word of autophagy, for example.
Bless you.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any doctorate in the world where you literally need multiple years to get it.
You need, I think, maybe not the like 8 or 10 or a million years that we require in the US per se, but like there's definitely
some things are really hard and take a lot of time to learn.
Yeah.
I agree, but I think that if someone actually really cared about conveying knowledge well and quickly, they could teach one other person in less than 24 months anything that we know, as long as that the subject was, intellectually capable of grasping it. I don't think you need 8 years to learn this shit, and it's convenient, and we teach a lot of other things as well, which is why it can take so long. But if you really wanted to teach someone one specific domain of knowledge, you could cover everything quickly.
Maybe a specific fact. I wonder, if I had Richard Feynman's undivided time for 2 years, could he teach me everything he knew?
About physics?
Yeah.
I think so.
I don't know. I think he could give me
I
a
don't
good
know if I
introduction to
can
everything he
grasp some
knows.
of the high-level math, honestly.
Right. If you can't grasp with math, then that's an issue.
Well, but I presumably could with enough time. I'd need 2 more years for that, right? I think
Maybe.
that's where the multiple, I see the point you're making, that some stuff might not take literal, 4,000 hours of dedicated time to learn, but it might take, a couple thousand.
I mean, you can put in 10 hours a day, and any reasonable person could, 6 days a week. That's 60 hours a week that you can put into learning something.
Easy, Elon. Most of us are way lazier than that.
Yeah, and it's
If you're motivated, you could totally do 60 hours a
Oh,
week.
I think
see,
it's the
therein
difference.
lies the rub.
Yeah, I think this is the difference here between like you're out getting drinks with your friends and you're like, oh, I just did this cool paper on myelination with my,
Right, yeah.
mentor at work, and then like if your audience probably doesn't want 24 months
No.
of knowledge about this. They're like, oh, well, okay, so what's like the basic version of this? And then it's actually kind of hard to figure out like
Yeah.
where to start and
It's
how much
certainly-
to simplify it, and also sort of gauge how much they care. Like that's again another fun autistic thing is like I love hanging out with other rationalists because I almost never run into somebody who's just like, oh, I don't care, just give me the short version.
Yeah.
Like that's fun.
I mean, it's certainly not something you can do in a few hours or even a few weeks. So there can be great leaps of inferential distance that just make things impossible to explain to any reasonable audience. Like I got way off on a tangent where like someone really dedicated and interested in something could learn something, whereas what we're talking about right here is just general conveying information to other people that you know casually.
If I'm writing a book
Hmm.
or a paper or giving a talk and I only have an hour for the talk or something, how much do I need to cover before I can get to my point? That's where this comes in, right?
Right.
It's I don't have the audience's attention for 4,000 hours. I only have them for 1. So
Yeah.
how many steps do I need to cover before I can get there?
Yeah.
There's a good actually example of this in Sam Harris's latest episode. He had Neil deGrasse Tyson on, and Tyson co-authored a new book called Cosmic Queries, which for longtime listeners of Star Talk Radio, his podcast, they'll recognize that that's a section of the show. And it's kind of like XKCD, what if questions.
Cool.
Harris remarked that this book felt amazing. It was geared for somebody without a science background.
Yeah,
And,
Tyson's really good at. I mean, I guess that's why they picked him to be the new Carl Sagan. But like conveying complicated topics to a lay audience in a way that's not just like going over your head, but also like not intimidating or like some people, I don't know, like also just don't want to hear about stuff because they don't want to feel like they're being talked down to. I think they actually address that in the expecting short inferential distances.
Yeah.
Where at the end, I think like Eliezer was like, you definitely better not tell people how many inferential steps you're going back in order to explain a thing to them, because then they'll get mad.
Both
What, you think I'm stupid? I can't understand this. They like, well, no, you don't understand it.
both Tyson and Sagan were famously into the marijuana. Maybe they both think, how do I explain this to me after I've had a few joints?
Could be. I didn't know Tyson was famously into it.
Isn't he? I think he's talked about it a few times on talk shows.
I don't follow him too closely, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay.
Um,
I mean, maybe I'm mixing him up with someone else, but I wouldn't think I
personally
am because
find
it's
that
Tyson.
marijuana makes me better at empathy. Like it makes me less stuck in my own head. So I think that it's easier to both like listen to other people with your full attention and then also kind of think about their perspective while you're trying to talk to them. Maybe that's just me, or maybe that's a more common experience.
I think that's basically it, and that's basically what you get on MDMA.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's an empathogen, right?
Yeah, I almost never use marijuana recreationally. I use it mostly to sleep. But what's fun is take it like a couple hours before bed, and then you go take a shower. And I've got a shower speaker to like listen to music, because because being left alone with my own thoughts, forget that, even for a 10-minute shower. So.
Oh, shit.
Oh, I use Aqua Notes. They're like, the waterproof little notepads, and I have just a bunch of them stuck around in my shower to record shower thoughts.
Oh, that's fun.
I actually just come up with a lot of my best ideas in the shower, which is common. But like,
I usually rush through showers now. I'm like, I ain't got time for this, and so I don't have a lot of brain power to devote to thinking about things.
It's like, it's weird because it's not even brain power. It's sort of like, I think it engages the diffuse mode. That's inferential distance thing. Let's see. The brain has the active mode and the diffuse mode. When you're consciously thinking about a thing, you get your best results generally by like crunching on it for a bit and then like going to sleep or playing a video game or taking a shower, and you redirect your conscious thoughts to something else while in the background diffuse mode keeps crunching on the problem. And then like it feels like magic sometimes, where like maybe you'll be stuck on a math problem, you take a nap and you wake up and you're just like, oh, I know what that is. That's so obvious.
Right.
I love that. I at least twice in the last year have woken up with like a solution to a problem I was working on at work.
Oh, awesome.
And one time was like a week late, and I was like, oh, that's why this didn't work. But
it just feels like this flash of insight, right?
Yeah.
And then it's kind of creepy, but it's actually just the fact that you don't see your brain doing like the mechanisms in the background, but
I just
it's totally
that.
doing it.
Yeah, I just appreciate that it's doing it. But I brought up the Tyson thing real quick because he remarked when Sam said that, he says, I'm glad you said that because that's interesting. My first book that I wrote, I'm quoting Tyson, I wrote for adults, and or maybe I forget what audience he wrote it for. Point is that adults felt like they weren't adult science books if they could understand the whole thing.
Oh.
And that they were like, no, if this is an adult book, there should be some stuff that goes over my head.
Huh.
And so since I can understand this must be for kids.
Wow, that's fucked up.
Well, not necessarily a bad, I don't know if that was like to say, this is a kid's book, forget this, it's not for me, but it must be geared towards a lower audience because I understood it all. Which, yes, that is fucked up in the sense that you shouldn't feel that way about science stuff.
Yeah.
But it was just I knew we were doing this post, I was listening to this podcast yesterday, and I'm like, hey, this ties in perfectly. They're not using the word inferential distance, but they're talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like this trilemma that he brings up about in the ancestral environment. If someone said something with no obvious support, they're either a liar or an idiot. And conversely, if someone says something to you and they don't have, or rather, if you say something to someone that to you is blatantly obvious, but the other person see it, then they're the idiot, or they're being obstinate just to annoy you. And then to top it all off, if someone says something with no obvious support and expects you to believe it, then they must be crazy.
Yeah, you're unlikely to think this person has well-supported background knowledge that no one in my band has even heard of, right?
Yeah.
I feel like this is maybe giving, I mean, like I get, this is a good intuition pump for maybe the way people have experienced this in their own lives, but like this is sort of not giving, I think, hunter-gatherers enough credit. For example, things like creating arrowheads or building fires are actually kind of hard, and often like there would be like the one or two, or I don't know how many people like that are the experts at that thing. People had specialization in things early on, making like the best balanced spears or spear throwers, things like which plants are edible, how to identify them,
tanning leathers, making them into clothes.
Mm-hmm.
This shit's actually pretty hard, and then like it's not even getting into agriculture, which is insanely hard. But like,
I think he softens it for himself by talking pre-agriculture, but your point stands. That,
yeah, maybe he just put it that way, like, oh yeah, those stupid cavemen, like.
Well, those cavemen
not straight up like calling out his audience or whatever, or his specific group of friends.
Yeah, but those cavemen with simpler lifestyles, right? It might be possible as a cave dweller, whatever, 30,000 years ago, to by the time you're an adult or middle-aged or whatever, to know enough to get by, everything that everyone knows. You know how to tan leather, you know how which fruits are safe, all that stuff.
And even if you don't know everything, you're no more than one step away. Like the guy that can nap out arrowheads can be like, you know how some rocks are sharp? And you know how sometimes when you hit two rocks together, one of them will break? Well, if you do it just right, you can make it break so it's sharp in the way you want it to be. Yeah,
you could like, maybe not in one sitting, but like you could apprentice somebody in making arrowheads, and I think most people probably could pick it up. So yeah, anyway.
But yeah, he points out a biologist talking to a physicist can justify evolution by saying it's the simplest explanation. And anyone, well-versed in science knows that is a word of power and it means a lot. Whereas to a layperson saying, but it's the simplest explanation may sound like an interesting factoid, but it's not a knockdown argument because they don't know how powerful of a tool that is.
Well, and I think even one step beyond that, it's not, if you have no take it to somebody who doesn't know what genes are, doesn't know what cells are, and it's like, oh yeah, no, this is the simplest explanation. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? The simplest explanation is that someone made us.
Yeah.
That is a very intuitive and simple sounding explanation.
That's
right?
true, yeah. I've seen people make things before. I can imagine a very big, powerful person making a very complicated thing like a human.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just scoop up some clay.
Right? Then you blow into its nostrils.
You pull a rib out, and then you make a female version.
Because you ran out of clay, so I guess you needed to use a rib instead.
There was a quote that I liked here. A clear argument has to lay out an inferential pathway starting from what the audience already knows or accepts. If you don't recurse far enough, you're just talking to yourself. And that's why I liked the Greatest Show on Earth, Richard Dawkins' evolution tutorial book so much.
Yeah.
I don't think it was till like chapter 4 or 5 where he starts actually talking about evolution.
Oh, cool.
He even says this is getting us close to it, but we're not there yet. We're going to keep daisy chaining on the way to understanding this.
Yeah.
And I think there must be some discussion of cells and genes, but then there was a whole chapter on domestication. It's like, this is something everyone knows because everyone has seen dogs, right? Yeah. And so like that, but we're not domesticating, we do the domestication of dogs, but just imagine nature domesticating them for another purpose. And
actually, dogs domesticated themselves.
Yeah, little column A, little column B, probably. Pugs didn't domesticate themselves.
Being pedantic.
Yeah, no, but yeah, fair point.
You seen the comic strip of the dog that the early wolf dog ancestor?
I have not.
It runs up to a human, or doesn't run up to a human. It cautiously approaches a human. I think this is probably an SMBC, and the human has some leftover scraps. And the dog says, okay, I can eat these scraps and I'll hang out with the humans. It'll be all right. And the other wolves are like, don't do it. You don't know what will happen. This is a bad idea. And the dog is like, well, what's the worst that can happen? I'll eat some of their scraps. I'll help them a little bit with stuff they need. We can be a good symbiotic relationship.
Please tell me the last panel is a pug.
Fast forward 10,000 years. It's a pug in one of those bonnets and shit looking up balefully at its owner. What have you done to me?
Man, I was at a bar and I was at a sports bar, but they had I appreciate this about Denver. I don't know if this is just a thing that bars are starting to do more of, but they don't just have the footballs on. They had hockey, golf, some MMA, and then just a dog show. So of course, me and my friends were all watching the dog show and commenting on the dogs. And I just started laughing my ass off when there was the pug that was the best in breed because it was the saddest ping pong ball head and potato body and little curly tail, and I was just
most deformed by the human breeders.
They made it non-functional as an animal. It can't walk. Its spine gets messed up because of the curly tail. It can't its little ears get ear infections. It can't close its eyes all the way, so it can't breathe because its face is smushed in to make it look like a little person face.
Wait, they can't close their eyes all the way?
Some dogs that they bred them specifically for having the big eyes because that's cute.
Yeah.
Get blindness or eye injuries and just issues by not being able to close their eyes all the way properly.
I didn't realize that was a thing too. I'd heard of all the others, but man.
But this little pug just did the best at being a little pug and doing his little puggy best.
Well, it was the best in breed. And it was the most puggy pug that I'd ever seen. I was like, we did that to a dog, or we did that to a wolf.
I know. There's some things that once we're done with the factory farms and the nightmare farms maybe we should start working on not intentionally making these genetic monstrosities.
Good people that are, for example, with pugs, there's the Retro Pug Project where people are trying to breed the pug back to a healthier form that still looks pug-like, but it has a nose.
I can dig it. Yeah, I like seeing. I don't know. I mean, some purebred dogs are fun, but this is a common thing. The more purebred you get, the more genetic problems they tend to have, right?
It depends also on what you're breeding it for. That was kind of actually me and my bunch of nerds were talking about this, but they have the different categories of sporting breeds, herding breeds, and the
dogs
ones
with
that
jobs are usually pretty functional.
The ones that win the best in the herding category have to be functional because the whole point is you're counting on them to guard your sheep or whatever. But then you got into the toy category, and it's just I guess their function is to be delightful to humans.
Dogs with jobs are usually psychologically healthier too, because
Oh, dogs
They
like
have something to
having a
do.
thing to do. Like
Yeah.
I find it really funny that like
They're a lot
corgis,
like
for
humans.
example, even though they like look like little breads with a tail. Or no, they don't even have a tail. Like they're just
They do
little
have
breads.
a tail. The tail is cut off, usually when they're puppies.
Oh,
What
do
kind
they?
of dog?
They dock the
Corgis.
tails on
It
corgis?
depends on the corgi. Some are bred. Some don't have tails.
I heard that can happen, but it's extremely rare. Almost all the corgis that you see have had their tails cut.
I don't know what percentage almost all means, because I know that
Less than 10%.
I will double check that,
Okay.
because I know that congenital non-tailed ones are. I didn't think a 1 in 10 occurrence, but I also know this because I like corgis.
Yeah.
Corgis were an example of like a pretty dog that I think is fun when they're purebred, but they also look fun crossed with literally anything, because you just get that dog.
Oh my
mixed
god,
into a
I love
corgi.
it. Yeah, if any dog mixed with a corgi just looks like a derpier version of that dog.
Yeah.
Like, especially like, I don't know, if you want to, I don't know, if you're having a bad day, listeners, just look up like corgi mixed with like a chow or corgi mixed with like a mastiff, and it's just like
Mixed
I don't
breed
know.
corgi.
Yeah, Doberman corgi is just like it has the like, very stern German looking like sort of military, but then like it's just got a little bit of a dopey smile going on and it's a little floppy. But anyway, corgis are they're herding dogs, and they're really intelligent, and so if you just have one as a pet and you don't give it things to do, it'll just try to herd things like children or you. Or
You guys
the other
mentioned-
pets in your house.
Speaking of if you need to pick me up, you
Really
guys
funny.
said dogs with jobs. It's also a great subreddit.
Dogs with jobs?
Mhm.
Cool.
There's also cats with jobs.
Oh yeah.
Cats with jobs is mainly just like a cat sitting on a keyboard, and it's like, look, our new IT manager, which is really cute.
The cat's natural job is to eat rodents and other pests.
That is the occasional post on there. You'll be like, there's, it works for a museum, and it's actually got a little badge that says like head mouser of the museum, which
Nice.
is really, really cute.
Yeah.
I'm glad that like the cat, I don't know, like I've definitely met some cats that are just terrible at their job. Like I was hanging out with a friend's cat one day, and just like an insect fell from the ceiling and then just fell on its back on the couch between us and was waving its legs around like stuck, and the cat just looked at it and then looked at me, and I was like, "What? You're not doing the cat thing. Are you gonna?" No, it just like righted itself and then slowly walked away, and the cat sort of yawned and looked away, and I was just like, you would not have been kept around
Nope.
in the early agricultural days. But my cat is great because she catches flies,
Oh, that's awesome.
and she will leap in the air and bat them like out of the sky, which is insane because flies are very fast.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't normally suspect her of being capable of these things because she also does some really derpy things, but like she can snap into predator mode when necessary. Anyway, though, are we done with, I guess, inferential distances?
Except for two corgi facts. One,
Okay.
a lot of corgis do have tails, and they're big and bushy and adorable.
Okay.
And I found a 2/3 number.
2/3?
Are
when I was-
born without tails.
Born without. When I was looking, I just saw that it's rare for them to be without, but they didn't have any numbers. 2/3 born without, though.
Pembroke corgis were also bred with a gene that affects about 2/3 of all Pembrokes. Those are the queen ones, the tan and white ones.
Oh, maybe the thing I was looking at all corgis rather than just Pembroke corgis.
The cardigan ones are like the black and gray and white ones.
Okay.
Those tend to usually have tails.
Okay.
I'm kind of a corgi expert. No.
All right.
I'm a corgi enthusiast.
Okay.
But yeah, anyway, I don't endorse that tail business. Fuck all that. If
Yeah.
anyone's gonna go lopping things off of anything,
I think it makes sense for, I mean, like, Dobermans that are working dogs, they crop the ears and tails because they're like police dogs and they don't want them to get injured.
Mm.
But like, then people
how would
also
not having a
just do
tail
it for looks.
make you a more dangerous
It's so, I guess, like another
People can
dog
grab
or
it.
a person can't
for
grab
all
it.
of a second until the Doberman rips its hands off. If anything, I think that make the Doberman more dangerous, which is kind of what you want in a guard animal.
Well, you don't want it to get injured.
No,
You want
that's
it to injure
true.
the other guy.
Gonna breed a Doberman that's just all teeth and claws someday. And what was the other corgi fact?
Might have been about cardigans and
Oh,
Pembroke.
okay.
But the other thing was that, according to poodlemixclub.com/corgipoo,
God.
most are born with no tails.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind then.
I need to see a
take
picture
it
of a
back.
corgi poo.
I was just happy to share that because I
And
wouldn't
thank you for correcting the record.
I wouldn't be so enthusiastic about them if I knew that most of them were mutilated at birth. So
Mm.
Oh my god, corgi poos are like what you'd expect. It's a corgi, but it's just like real curly,
hold on,
I-
Google this now too.
extra boof.
I do want to end this just by focusing on Eliezer's last sentence, where he says, "And if you think you can explain the concept of systematically underestimated inferential differences briefly in just a few words, I've got some sad news for you." And in part, that's, a joke about how long this post is, but also, it's not just this post. Like, almost at least several dozen of the last few posts have been leading up to this, if not most of the sequences up until now. Like,
I mean, the sequences are sort of a effort to go several inferences back
to get the
explain
average,
these like complicated.
It's in large part an attempt to get the layperson to understand, just from their regular background knowledge, to why general AI is a big deal and could be a human existential threat, and we should work on it.
Yeah.
And he's gotten this far so far, and we've been going at this for a number of years. Admittedly, we've only done one per week on average, and he posted, like 2-3 per week.
I think it was every day for 2 years.
Every day? Okay, yeah. So, it wouldn't have taken him nearly as long as it's taking us, but yeah, it was a lot of time just to get to this point to lead up to here.
Yeah, I wanted to pull that out as well, because I was curious if either of you have ever successfully conveyed the idea of inferential distance to somebody outside the rationalist sphere. Double illusion of transparency notwithstanding.
Huh.
Not successfully. I have had unsuccessful attempts. And I do tend to run into the whole like person just sort of being like, "Oh, you just think you're smarter than me because you've got your fancy degree or you're on the internet all the time or whatever." Like,
yeah, the whole being condescending is a big failure mode.
I keep thinking of my dad,
or
which
thinking
is like
you're condescending.
Kind of, I don't know. I feel like I bust on my dad on the show a lot. Now if he doesn't listen to it at some point, he's not a dumb person. It's just like a stubborn person, but like he's anti like global warming.
I'm also anti-global warming. We shouldn't do that.
I mean, like,
I know.
I've tried to
I
explain
like
to
my
him one
globe
time
at the
that
current
like,
temperature.
men like women with large breasts because of obvious evolutionary things, and he just laughed and was like,
I just like them because they're pretty.
Nobody's looking at breasts and thinking, "Oh, like that person would be good at feeding babies." And I was just like, no, they're not thinking it.
You don't need to be thinking it.
Yeah.
And then like also money, where like my dad is against the stock market, and he found out that I was investing. He's like, "Oh man, like you can't be doing that fake money shit." And I was like,
all money is fake.
Do you understand that? Yeah, like all money, like this is a piece of cotton that's reinforced with like, I don't know what money's made of anymore. You could just say, yeah, it's a piece of paper with like a president's face on it that we've all sort of just like mass hallucinated ourselves into believing has value.
I mean,
you do understand this, right? Like
most money nowadays is just a number in some bank's computer.
Yeah, it's like you cannot eat this though, because like that was my dad's thing, is that there's real money and fake money, and money that is in the stock market is fake money because its value can change. And I was just like, but actual like inflation, Dad.
If we're gonna say real money and fake money, real money is stuff, and it's stuff that people need.
But that's not money. That's just that's wealth.
But yeah, I suppose so. But I'm just thinking like if that's about as real as money can get, right? And it's like, look,
things you can trade for
these,
things that people need to survive,
right? Now
but like
I can
money,
barter with you.
Money specifically is like super fungible. It's the whole point of money is that it's abstract. It's not an actual thing.
Totally. Well, and like the other just main virtue of money is that I can transfer, like, what do you need to live? Food, water, electricity. Well, you have all that stuff, but I need skill of yours. Well, how about I give you, instead of shit you don't need, like stuff, I give you stuff that you can go get stuff that you want with it. Right. And we call that stuff money.
Yeah. How about I give you 10 electricities, which you can later barter for food?
Right.
Well, actually, I think that is hilarious. Is my dad is a carpenter, and he does actually barter system stuff a lot. One time he like remodeled a dude's kitchen in exchange for getting dental work.
Oh, that's cool.
So like maybe he's actually just sort of coming from a even further place of inferential distance.
And then neither of them is text on that too.
Like,
even though technically they're supposed to declare it to the government and be like, here's your money for the thing he did. But yeah, no one does that.
There was one last thing on this post. I don't usually read the comments, but I had time this weekend. And the top comment was really good by user Constant2. The explanation from ancestral environment seems likely. However, there's also a rational argument for refusing to accept a claim unless all steps have been laid out from your own knowledge to the claim. While there are genuine truth seekers who have genuinely found truth and who we therefore ideally sorry. While there are people who are genuine truth seekers who have genuinely found truth and who we therefore should ideally believe, nevertheless, a blanket policy of simply taking steps at
taking people at their word.
Thank you. Go ahead and someone else finish that one.
Has the unfortunate side effect of also rendering us vulnerable to humbug. great word, because we're not equipped to tell apart humbug from the true statements many steps removed from our knowledge. Which, yeah, was kind of what I was saying about how, like, I feel like we're kind of, like, being mean to hunter-gatherers, because they're actually, yeah.
They knew complex stuff that would take a long time for me to learn, and they weren't just sitting there shitting in their hands and painting on walls, right? Like they were doing stuff.
They weren't just doing that.
Yeah. In addition to doing that, they were doing other things.
Right.
But I pulled this one out because, say you're looking for a treatment for something and someone's like, oh, what you really need is my really expensive crystal therapy or something. And you're like, no, I'm pretty sure that's bullshit. They could try to, if they were somehow also first in rationalist lingo, they'd be like, look, we haven't crossed all the inferential steps that you need to understand this, which is, if that could be true for real stuff too, right?
Yes.
So it's interesting that I think Constant 2 makes a valid point that, like, rejecting stuff you don't understand.
Yeah. Like, if you didn't have any knowledge of, I don't know, you have, like, gallstones and you're somebody that has just never looked this up, you're fucking busy, and, like, you get 3 people saying, okay, well, you could take this medicine, or you could do, like, this therapy or this diet, or you could use these crystals. You'd want the people to each explain, okay, well, why should I do this instead of this other thing? Right. And I think that, I wish that there was, like, more respect for the, Neil deGrasse Tysons of the world, the type of person who is actually really good at laying something out and sort of being able to gauge where you are inferentially, what things they need to explain to you, and then catching sort of whether you're confused or not and filling those gaps in. I've definitely seen this. Again, I'm like, the medical profession's on my mind, but there's some doctors that will just talk completely over their patients' heads, or will just do argument for authority, like, oh no, this is what all the papers say is the best treatment, or whatever, versus, like, I have a great psychiatrist who's a nerd like me, so the last call I did with my psych just to, like, discuss how my meds were working, we ended up not even talking about that, where it was just, like, talking about different, like, neurotransmitters and new papers that are out and novel therapies and how excited we were about that. But, like, my psych is the type of person who, if I had questions, I would, like, trust that she either is going to tell me, like, what she knows to the best of her knowledge, or she'll be like, you know what, I actually don't know, I'm going to look that up and I'll send you some articles and then my sort of professional evaluation of it, which is great.
Yeah, I was going to mention the opposite of this, which was many people in school had a teacher who had been teaching the same subject for 30 years.
Oh, yeah.
And they're
just reading the textbook to you.
Or they're like, I get, half my class usually gets C's or D's, because this stuff is hard. And it's like, no, you just suck at teaching it.
Yeah.
And you don't remember what it's like to not know this stuff.
You shouldn't be proud of that fact.
It's easy for you to think, oh no, this is actually easy, y'all should understand it, because you've been understanding it for, decades. And they don't remember what it was like to come from that position of ignorance.
Yeah.
So
before we end this, can I take it real quick to culture war land to get a little spicy, but only just for a second? Okay. So
that's where we're going. So
okay, I'd like to occasionally, maybe once every couple months or so, watch videos from partisans on either side that are popular with the peoples, I guess.
Either side of what?
Of the culture war, both people on far left and far right.
Oh, so just like
not far,
morality
but strongly.
things or politics things.
Yeah, politics things. I'm thinking on the right side, the Hodgman twins. They have a cool YouTube thing, and they're very charismatic. They're fun to watch. And there's 2 of them, and one of them is, like, more extreme than the other, so you can, like, see this interplay. It's really interesting. But anyways, I see this on both sides, where someone will say, I don't even understand how the people on the right think. Yeah. They just must be greedy bastards who believe, I got mine, the rest of you can all fuck off and die. They're literally evil. There's no point negotiating with them. And I see the same thing with one of the Hodgman twins. He sometimes says things like, Lefty, you must be brain damaged. Either that or you're just evil. And like he honestly doesn't understand how someone on the left could think and come to the conclusions that they've come to that bring them so far from where he is. And his brother, like, tries to rein him in. He's like, no, they're not evil. There's, like, ways you can come to this conclusion. He's like, no, there's no way. It's not possible. And obviously it is. But, like, people on both sides do it all the time. And I think it's just because there's such a huge inferential distance of, if you started out in a certain culture and your culture keeps going in a certain way over many decades and seeing the same kind of
abortion
evidence.
Is murder.
It really leads up to a vast difference in the end that you have to go way, way back to bridge that gap.
This will tie really well into basically point 3 that comes up in our main segment here. But in general, if you're explaining away something that, or somebody, or some group of people that disagree with you as saying they're just evil or whatever,
Stupid or evil.
you don't understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And it's not that you can't because you're not a bad person and only bad people can understand where they're coming from. It's that they don't think they're bad people.
Yeah.
And it's not because they're woefully misguided. They might be, but they're not so misguided that you can't at least understand where they're coming from.
Oh yeah, that's
if you
also a
actually
thing
try.
that I've run into where people, and I've experienced this myself like much earlier on, I think before this became an explicit value of mine, where people don't even want to try to understand where they're coming from because they're worried that they'll get tainted.
Yeah.
That is related also to the main segment.
All right.
So,
Well, then let's finish this up. For next time.
all right. Next time we're doing 3 because one of them is crazy short and
Okay.
basically covered in this one. Explainers shoot high, aim low, double illusion of transparency, and no one knows what science doesn't know.
Excellent. Alrighty, let's, before we get into our main topic, have a quick feedback from last episode. We haven't had one of these in a long time, and this one is special because the person giving the feedback is local to Colorado, and so local that she lives with me.
Local to this very house.
Yes, so we can actually have her on for the feedback segment. Hey, Miss Charlie, would you like to say hello?
Aloha, y'all.
You had some feedback for us.
Yeah. So the last episode, I enjoyed it a lot, but it was also frustrating.
That's what I like to hear.
Because I think a lot of points were lost because of no set vocabulary. And you guys got off track a lot because you didn't have a set vocabulary. As you kept talking about children when the discussion was supposed to be about young adults. And you kept mentioning using the word children when you're talking about young adults and teens, using the word teens when you're talking about children and young adults, and just switching terms. And then you kept getting pulled into talking about children. And that's an entirely different discussion because we're not talking about pre-adolescents and, possibly tweens, but definitely not pre-adolescents. So that would have been helpful. And if you guys
So, Stephen,
redo
stop calling 24-year-olds children.
Well, I to be fair, I think this just demonstrates the fuzziness of the concepts, right?
Mhm.
So that's part of what the article was getting at.
It's kind of what we were struggling
or
with
the books.
too, I think.
Yeah. Well, we struggled with it, I think, because the concepts are fuzzy. Like,
Well, I think children should absolutely not be used for anyone who's gotten through puberty.
I understand that the concepts as they stand are fuzzy, but there's no reason you guys can't make it better.
we totally could have laid it out better. But yeah, I
Children is preteen, and anybody who's hit 13 or older is now a teen rather than a child.
Sure.
Because, it's in part of the name of their age. Teens are teens.
And you could use young adults for people that are in an age range of teen, but not voting yet. So not, according to our current laws, officially an adult at 18 magically. Bing.
And interestingly, the young adult book classification is for people generally around 13, 14 and up. Like the Hunger Games series is probably the most well-known young adult series. I'm not sure if that's still true, but yeah, that's aimed for people around the 13, 14 age range.
It's like
Yeah.
Hunger Games, Twilight, the Harry Potter books, which
The later Harry Potter books. I don't think the earlier ones were quite YA. They were probably more like
they were early reader.
Yeah.
But yeah, Charlie, are you familiar with tabooing terms? I feel like
Vaguely,
that's something
but
we
I
could
love
probably do more.
definitions.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
helps me get on track.
When you say, can we taboo like the word children, it forces people to say what they really mean.
because we might have different mental handles that attach to the word child, like you and I might, right?
Mhm.
So if we're like, all right, look, we're talking past each other when we keep using the word child. Let's say anyone under 12.
or
And-
prepubescent.
Sure. And then that way, like, because I might mean child, it mean anybody who's I
Has
wouldn't-
childish behavior.
or anyone who I wouldn't trust to operate a motor vehicle or something. I could have some
Donald Trump.
esoteric definition. Sure.
I don't know what Donald Trump is.
Fair point.
But yeah, so tabooing is saying, all right, let's have this conversation again, or at least continue this conversation without using the word that keeps confusing us, right?
Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, that would have been valuable. Like I said, I think there's some self-awareness of that during the episode, but yeah, it might have been. I don't listen to our podcast, so it may have come off way more annoying than it was to talk about. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I hope I can be helpful in the future.
Totally.
Because there's nothing you guys can't do when you take a coffee break to kind of recalibrate.
There's nothing we can't do once we've got the power of coffee.
That's the subtext.
I feel like Charlie, you would be a really good moderator.
Oh.
Like, everybody shut up. Okay, what are we talking about? Or like, wait, go back.
We have had some requests to have more Charlie on the show already.
Shucks and thanks. And I wanted to clarify a couple things about young adults and sex. Because, it was pointed out that, I'm an exception because I'm I was incredibly mature for my age. And also, like, I turned out okay, despite the stuff that I went through. And I just felt like when I was listening to that, I got a little uncomfortable because if someone didn't hear that episode, they might not understand the context of the discussion properly. So I just wanted to make it clear, like, there's no point in our last discussion that I deny that sexual events can be traumatic, regardless of age. And that's an important distinction.
I think I also said that, but like, I also just want to keep reiterating that so people don't get the wrong idea that, like, yes, PTSD can happen and it can be really, like, debilitating. Not everyone that has stuff happen to them, I guess, does come out of it okay, or even like the sort of, well, you're an exception because you came out fine. Like, it's like, maybe like I'm functional now as an adult, but like it doesn't mean I came out fine. Like, I still have traumatic flashbacks to stuff. I can function, but like I've gone through therapy and shit too, and not everybody has the same accesses to resources or whatever, the same supportive friendships that I've had. So like, I hope that, I guess, both of us weren't like downplaying the seriousness of the topic.
Thank you, Jace. Yeah, I just want to, the fact that I am a functioning adult now, I just want to let people know that is harder than it looks. And it's a recent development in my mental health. I'm much higher functioning than I was just a year ago versus 2 years ago. And if you were to meet me a decade ago, well, I don't think we'd be having this productive discussion. And I'm not smarter. I'm mentally healthier. So there's definitely damage. The damage of mental health issues is real and it's ongoing, and it's so contextual and unique to each individual. So I want to acknowledge that. And I also want that to give power to my argument that young adults should be recognized as young adults and treated as such. I don't think that
you mean as
putting
opposed to
people
just
in
saying
bubble wrap because they might be traumatized or make a mistake that they regret is worth the damage that it does, preventing them from being capable. And you have to experience mistakes to learn from them, and you have to experience responsibility in ever-changing amounts to grow.
Yeah.
Preferably like in a supportive environment too.
Yes.
Like, not just like, let kids go make mistakes, but like, let's not put any support structure in place to like help them out when they get traumatized.
Right.
Sure.
But just complete infantilization, it retards your growth. It doesn't make you safer. It makes you a worse human.
That's actually the entire subject of today's episode, which is why this is this is why I chose this one for a good continuation of the last two.
Cool.
No, I mean, you make a good point. I read back through this week of, or I skimmed through Enyash's notes on that book, and like I'm still mainly convinced that 90% of that problem can be solved with just not having shitty parents, and school's its own subject. No, I mean it.
No, I understand that you're saying that, but like 90% of the problem of falling off a cliff and dying is gravity. Like, not having shitty parents is an extremely hard problem to solve.
Right.
You can't just say stop having shitty parents, kid.
No, I agree that this is like an avenue for people with shitty parents to find a way to get out of that situation a little easier than they have it now. It's still one of those things where, like, if you're 14 and want to emancipate and you can't drive, well, someone still needs to get you the 9 miles from here to the testing center where you take that test, right?
And you still need some amount of, or what am I trying to say? Like, I think if a 14-year-old is emancipated and they're like, it's like, okay, kid, we'll give you your own apartment and here's like your bus pass. Like that's still, I think, not great because you need role models, like mentor figures. It doesn't have to be a parent. In fact, it's probably worse if it's a shitty parent, but like.
And I think much of the point is that the current system encourages parents to be what we call shitty parents because that is viewed as the correct and proper way to raise children.
Mhm.
You do send them to school like this. You do have control over their lives. You put on curfews. You don't allow them privileges if they do things you consider irresponsible. Like, that is what being a good parent is, and that's bad.
I've seen some real extreme versions, like you've probably seen these YouTube videos of a parent like smashing a child's PlayStation in front of them because the kid didn't listen to the parent, and then like you're supposed to cheer for that parent, like, oh, that dad's a hero, and it's just like, that is just straight up abuse.
I feel like you guys are making things up. Sorry, I don't usually disagree with that vehemently, but I do not think that the role model, and maybe different ideals of parenting have different standards, but I've never seen those YouTube videos, but I've heard about them. I feel like those are shown to showcase horrible people.
In an office I used to work at, somebody, like a bunch of my coworkers had kids, and somebody like posted that, I think, on our like off-topic Slack, is like, look at this is hilarious. And then the like sort of the general idea was people laughing, like, oh yeah, like look at that dumb kid. Or,
Yeah,
like,
I mean, maybe you worked with stupid people. Maybe I've just got high standards of people or something. But like, at the very least, that's a really stupid thing to do as a parent because PlayStations cost money, and you can make the same point by unplugging it and taking it away.
But
and
you
not
shouldn't unplug
smashing
it and
through.
take it away either.
No, but if your goal is to prevent the child from doing it, which again shouldn't be whatever, but like that's
like
but
just
that is just stupid hitting it with a hammer.
that was
right?
public humiliation.
Right.
But also, that's the point. If your child doesn't go to school, you have to discipline them. You take away their property. If your child wants to go downtown and, like, I don't know, hang out with friends or learn something in their off time instead of going to school, then you're supposed to do these things. Take away their freedoms, make them more like an infant.
Or at least according to some like schools of thought about parenting.
I will say,
I mean,
according to
not
some
only are
schools
you
of thought about
supposed to, but
parenting-
like you can get fined or go to jail if you don't.
well, that's new.
Eh,
Yeah,
I think that's not that new. Like that, there's definitely been like
that's like I think 15 years ago was so that's new to me because
the
now
whole
that we're all
idea of
super
control
old.
your kids. Like
No, like the idea that it might have been in 2003 or 5. This is in Johnathan Haidt's essay. Parents, or the first case of a parent being arrested for their child going to a park unattended.
Oh, no. I'm not even talking about, well, I mean, yes, that's just stupid. And I'm glad they're starting to put laws to make that kind of law illegal or that kind of thing illegal. But like, even when I was 14, which was,
Truancy laws.
yeah, well, truancy laws have been along
Are a
for a
good
long
example.
time. Yeah, that you have to be in school or the parent gets a fine or jail time. But even when I was 14, I
And
knew
or
that,
their children taken away.
yeah,
I
if I
understand
were
that.
to cause some sort of property damage to someone else, if I were to smash their car up or something, it'd be my parents that would have to pay for that.
Because you don't have money.
Well, right. But that it means that I am not an adult. I am a child. They are still liable for what I do. And so now they have to act like jailers to keep me in line.
What would, and I don't want to have the whole last episode again, but I'm kind of curious. What would you have instead? You're 12. You think it'd be a lot of fun to go down the street on your bike with a sharp stick on the end of with a sharp rock on the end of a stick and just key every car on the
Mhm.
road. And so maybe let's say you're 13, so you're past that magic number that instead of 18 is now 13.
Mhm.
So now you're a young adult.
maybe you
What should
go
the state do?
to-
Make you get a job and pay for it?
Either
Absolutely.
But
Yes.
how many?
or do community service?
But
like
make
But
you
you
pay
guys-
for it,
you
or
make it
even
sound
put
like
you
it's
in jail
easy.
for vandalism if that is a thing that adults could go to jail for.
So we're talking about keeping kids still within a realm of protection. I guess young adults. Sorry,
Mhm.
Again, concepts are fuzzy. But let's throw this 13-year-old who's a fucking idiot because they're 13
Mm-hmm.
in jail and have them
I
really
say
enjoy the benefits
no,
of
'cause I'm
prison.
against the
If-
penal system. That's not
Right.
rehabilitative, and it serves no one to throw anyone in jail,
I
except in extreme cases.
Yeah.
I
How long
basically
does your
agree
car
that we
sit
should
there
get
with
rid of the jail, but treat them like any other adult that has committed a crime. And hopefully that crime does not,
keyword.
hopefully the
think-
punishment does not include jail because the system is
That's-
fucked up if it does, but treat them like an adult.
I think I disagree with treating them exactly the same as a 30-year-old, but like there could be tiers of responsibility that you unlock that are more nuanced than the ones we have now, these like sharp categories or these fuzzy categories, honestly.
Mm.
Like, if
Like
they're-
maybe you'd have to go to like after school rehabilitation things, do community service, and like
Just basically jail light. I mean, if they're too if they're literally mentally incompetent to realize what they were doing would get them in trouble and is a bad thing to do, then you treat them like a child. That's literally what a child is, someone who is mentally incompetent to understand
I
that.
think also
But
you
if
should
they have the mental competency to understand it, you treat them like a person who has the mental competency to know that this is a bad thing and they shouldn't do it.
I don't think the competency is binary. I think it's gradual.
Right. But
Agreed.
I think
Yeah.
it's also not just competency. Like, if a 14-year-old is vandalizing a bunch of property, like, there's probably some other shit going on that's causing them to behave that way. Because I, worked at a library with a bunch of teens, and I, I think if you asked most of them, like, is that a cool or funny thing to do? Like, most of them actually are like, well, no, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't want someone to do that to my property. And that's just, like, obviously bad and dumb, and you'll get in trouble.
right,
And then there's, like, other kids who
if they're acting out, maybe
who
there's a
would
reason.
act out, and I could generally always tell why. It was usually because their parents were shitty,
Yeah.
or because there was a elementary school across the street from the library, and a lot of parents both worked, and they would tell their kids, okay, go to school. After school, you walk to the library, and then you wait there until we pick you up at 8 or 9 p.m., sometimes without giving them food.
Oh.
And it's like, if you've been locked in school for 8 hours already, like, you got up at 6 a.m., which is ridiculous for an adolescent-ish brain.
That's treating like an adult.
Like,
Adults aren't forced to go
I
to
don't think
someplace
adults
unless
should
they're
be
in
treated
jail.
that way either.
Or have to go to work.
But
Yeah,
like,
but then
you
you've
don't have
decided-
to go to work if
You've
you don't want to live
decided you want
somewhere.
a job.
Well, those
Sure.
are their
You
decided
parents
you wanted
doing
to
the
eat and
best
stay
they
warm.
can.
Yeah, you literally don't
our
have to go
current
to work, whereas you have to go to
environment. They
school.
have to work for a living. They're culpable for their children if anything happens. They're roaming around.
it's very different. Like, it was like
Like-
there would be some instances of parents that were just negligent, and then there were some instances of parents that were working their asses off at multiple jobs and just couldn't afford. Like, they were doing the best they could.
Mhm.
But like, actually, you could see the difference in those kids too. The kids whose parents were doing the best they could, like, the kids were smart enough to kind of recognize that. They tended not to be the ones that acted out.
Mhm.
It was the ones whose parents would, like, I don't know, just be those weird jerky sort of parents that sort of commanded their kids around like it was a dog they owned,
Mhm.
who would end up throwing a football around in the library and breaking stuff.
Rebellion
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
attention-seeking behavior.
Yeah.
Right, that just like lashing out against a system that, like, honestly is being pretty bad to them.
Yeah.
And I think that kid shouldn't necessarily be punished like a criminal. Like, probably they could use some counseling. Maybe somebody could actually look at their parent situation and be like, I don't know what they could do, but
Well, and in a world where the system isn't designed to make the parents be the jailers of their kids, this would be a problem much less often.
yeah.
The kids wouldn't be treated like dogs because they
Oh.
would have other options.
Yeah, well, one of the issues actually, like, kids that were, for example, the kids that were throwing a football around, it's because they're locked up indoors all day and they have tons of energy, but
Mhm.
like, they sometimes would try to go play in the parking lot, and we as like the library staff would have to tell them, you're not allowed to do that because a car could hit you and then we'd be liable.
Because we have to infantilize you. I'm kidding. I'm pretending to use the language of the infuriated, treating kids like kids. But
Yeah. No, it was like actually like really, it was a hard decision to make. It was hard to discipline some of these kids because I felt like very sympathetic. I was like, I wish I could tell you, like, hey, why don't you go down to the park? It's only like a short bike ride away. But like, the parents were entrusting the library to be free daycare for these kids. And then, like, yeah, maybe we could be liable if we told them, hey, go to the park, and then they got kidnapped or whatever. Not that that would be likely to happen. But
I also felt gaslit by parts of the conversation because you guys are like, kids can't have jobs, kids can't have money. And I'm like,
Young adults.
Right.
Okay.
Young adults, sorry.
Mhm.
But like, I distinctly remember having a job before I was old enough to drive.
yeah, I had a
And,
job
like,
at 14. It was under the table, though. And
I
like,
think I
not
had a
everyone-
W-2 job.
My dad hooked me up with that. Like, I think that not every kid has the option to do that.
I had a job at 14 only because the manager was a dope and wasn't paying attention to local laws. I worked there for 8 months, and then 2 months before my 15th birthday was fired so they could rehire me when it was legal to hire me.
Oh, Jesus.
I remember having a job when I was in junior high,
What did
And-
you
call center.
do? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was so like it was a job with a paycheck. It wasn't cash.
Yeah.
And so this talk of like kids, young adults aren't allowed to have jobs. I guess I just need to Google what were the laws in Colorado 15, 20 years ago, because I remember being able to do this.
There's a lot of logistics involved. Like, there were jobs I couldn't get just because I didn't have a car, and my parents didn't like want to drive me to some of the jobs that I got. There was a job I had to quit because my dad like drove me to it a few times, and then was just like, yeah, this is inconvenient for me. You'll have to find something else.
Could you have gone to a call center job or any other job that you were qualified for instead of going to school?
No.
Oh,
I think I still had to go to
I think
school.
that's a problem.
Well,
You can't really hold down a full-time job if you have to be in school for 7 hours a
I
day.
didn't want to. I feel like dropping out of junior high school probably would have ruined my future.
I mean, yeah, probably would have been a bad idea.
I would have had
especially
great
in this.
prospects in the call center industry, but that's not what I wanted to do.
Yeah, it would
So-
it would have been a bad idea for you, especially in this economy.
I feel like compulsory education isn't like the necessary evil that people paint it out to be. Yes, school often sucks, but it doesn't have to suck.
School traumatized me. I think I would have done a lot better if I'd gotten out of it earlier and just totally skipped the whole college thing. All the jobs I ended up getting after, I was self-taught in anyway.
I think a lot of people, after working at the call center for a couple of years, would want to go back to school. I mean, I don't want to use you as an example, but like you had a whole bunch of shit jobs that you hated, like the bank teller and the PI stuff and everything, and eventually you were like, fuck this shit, and you went and got trained as a software engineer, and now you have a fucking amazing job.
But that was a choice. That wasn't
Yeah,
like
exactly.
compulsory. Oh, okay.
What if
That
kids
was your
had that
point.
choice?
Yeah.
To work shit jobs for a while and then be like, fuck this, I want to get a better job and go get trained in something.
I was I found school to be so incredibly damaging to myself that by my senior year I was skipping 3-4 days a week, showing up to take tests only. And that was because I had logically like proposed to my parents like, hey, emancipate me. I'm going to get my GED and travel for a while because school is dumb and pointless and torture. And they said, no, we'll call the police. You're not allowed to do any of that. And I was like,
I had a similar experience.
2 more years. I'm going to either like end up setting the place on fire or stabbing somebody in self-defense.
That's
I
someone
actually-
stealing 2 years of your
Yeah.
life at the prime of your life. That's not like 2 years at the shit tail end when you're sickly and can't do much.
That happened to me when I was 16 specifically. I remember that I just mentally checked out because school itself wasn't that bad. It was just the social stuff that was. I had really bad social anxiety, and being forced to be around people that basically wanted to bully or marginalize me, and being forced into social situations that like gave me panic attacks. I remember that I was just like, I'm going to try to just maintain a C average and get through it. But I was checked out. I was dissociated there's like big chunks of my memory of parts of high school and almost all of college that I'm just missing. It's creepy.
I forgot most of my childhood, but I feel like it was pretty good. So I don't know what to make of that.
But yeah, I think there's a difference. Well, maybe there's not. I don't know. Like this was straight up like depressive dissociation.
Sure.
I'm not sure if that describes what your childhood thing.
No,
was.
my childhood was basically fine. That describes my first couple years or my last couple years of college. But it's I mean the point. I see what you guys are saying. I guess it's just. I think I had one more thing to say about, was it jobs or was it? I don't know.
I did not drop out of school, even when I had a roommate and rent and had to work to pay rent. Thankfully, I had a vehicle, and it was a small place, so gas prices weren't that high, and I was able to commute and get things done.
What age was this?
15.
And did you legally have a vehicle?
Yeah.
Was it like
I grew up in a
scooter or
rural
something?
area, so you could get your driver's
Okay.
license at 14, and I'd been driving since I was a kid. So.
Cool?
I remember what I was going to say about the property thing about, because, and that's the thing too, like I mowed lawns and shit when I was a kid and I bought video games and whatever.
Could your parents take them away if you did something bad?
Not really, no.
Oh,
'Cause
okay.
I didn't really do that much bad stuff,
But
and they were
could
pretty
they have?
chill.
Like,
I mean, because
my
they're
parents-
physically bigger than me, sure.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm drawing contention with that because let's say they bought my PlayStation, as they probably did in this YouTube video, right?
Mhm.
Like if you've got a shitty roommate and they're not paying rent, they're leaving heroin needles all over the carpet and you keep stepping on them and it's really annoying.
Yeah.
You don't think you might like say, all right, you know what, fuck it, I'm taking my TV in my bedroom. It's no longer in the living room. Get
Yeah.
your own fucking TV.
Yeah, sure.
But
It's your TV.
well, it's kind of your TV if you're the parent and you bought it for them, right? Like.
Destroying it in front of them.
I'm not defending
violently?
that.
And then putting it on YouTube.
I vehemently said that's
Oh, okay,
obviously
okay.
insane and stupid,
Okay.
and on every dimension, including destroying your own property.
So I got,
But-
two things to say about that. I bought most of my own video game stuff. The big difference is the computer. My parents bought the computer for me because they thought it was important for school, which it was. But most of the things that I used for entertainment, I had bought myself, and my parents still could and did take them away as punishments. And Even more to the point, it's like it's hard to have the ability to own any property when, first of all, you have very little ability to make money, and second, even if you do have your own property, it's not legally yours. Your parents are allowed to take away things that you have bought even with your own money because they're your parents.
Yeah, I
Like, you
guess-
couldn't take away your roommate stuff to like be clean up the heroin needles, or I'm taking away your PlayStation until you do.
I think the other thing is that your roommate, like, you don't have any obligation to them. If you like give birth to a child, you sort of like I sort of think that like there should be a different standard in your relationship there.
I totally agree. No, I brought up the roommate example because if there's shared property and it's yours and you paid for it, like in this example, if your parent got you a TV or something and you're behaving in a way that is bringing down their quality of life for whatever reason, and they're like, "Look, I'm taking away the TV till you get your shit together." I feel like that's exactly how you treat an adult.
I'd still,
Under the same circumstances. If you move the goalposts and say, "Well, no, it's it's not their TV," or they couldn't buy it because they aren't allowed to work or something, leaving all that aside, this is how I would treat an adult. If if my roommate and I shared a car and they wouldn't stop drinking and driving, I'm like, all right, you're not using my car anymore.
Yeah, totally.
But then I'm taking away their stuff, and I'm doing exactly what I'd be doing to a kid, but I'm treating them like an adult.
I disagree that you're taking away their stuff. That is your stuff, and there's an agreement between you and the roommate as to why you're both allowed to use it.
So I'm taking away. They're privileged to use my stuff,
Right.
which is kind of what you're doing with a child with their PlayStation. I'm not saying you smash it with a hammer. I'm saying that it might make sense to like, all right, look, you're ruining my life.
What if you bought the roommate the TV as a gift and then you took it back?
So that does add the wrinkle, and that's more like what it's like to buy stuff for your kids, right?
Yeah.
I guess what I'm just saying is that like it doesn't strike me as necessarily like abusive or insane behavior to discipline your kid that way. That said, I was like never disciplined that way. I think honestly my parents were just, I mean, I like to joke that my brother and I were each half of an accident because we were identical twins, and you don't get to plan on that. I don't think they planned on 3 kids. I think they planned on 2, and 3 wore them out. And so they let me have a small TV in my room because I would quietly sit in there and watch it. And if they tried to take it away, I would be annoying. And they're like, you know what? I would rather sleep and have him not be disciplined than, let him just watch TV instead, right?
This is kind of a segue, but I just think that once you give someone something, it's theirs.
And abusive and insane is like, it's a tricky word because like in this system where parents are held liable for what their adult children do, it's not that insane to be like, I don't want to go to jail for something you're doing, so I'm putting these limits on you, and especially when society tells them they should. It's just in the broader picture, if society wasn't like this, you wouldn't structure it like this. You would say that is an insane thing to do. Don't do that. And we're kind of stuck that way right now. I'd like to not be stuck there.
So what I'm hearing is that we need to nudge down the parents' culpability and nudge up the young
community,
adults'
Yes.
responsibility
Rights and freedoms always come with responsibilities.
at the same time.
Yeah, that's what makes you more of an adult, having more responsibility and learning how to use that.
Yeah, I wish
How
that
to
there were
direct your own
more
life.
gradients there to sort of like.
Not just the, oh, you're 18, now everything flips.
Yeah, actually,
Maybe a
like
series of tests that measure you on various things.
maybe something that I sort of also object to. We should probably start to get to the main topic, but just the whole idea of if your kid's acting out, that you should punish them in this like default to sort of this authoritarian punitive response instead of sitting the kid down and sort of like hey, why are you doing this?
Right.
Like, and then trying to maybe negotiate like, all right, well, because I've told you not to do this and you have like broken your word, so I'm going to limit your TV access. If you do it again, I'm going to limit it further. But if you show me that you can take a week and not do this thing, then you can get your TV privilege back. Like, I'd rather there be more,
That seems what Harry James Potter Evans Verus would say is that no parent would ever reduce themselves to the level of negotiating with someone they view as a child, which I think
what
is
bugs
true
me
in
about
this
the other
world
thing.
and is bad.
Like, that's sort of when Steven was talking about the roommate. I've had like shitty roommate situations, or even just like where maybe even the roommate wasn't necessarily a bad person. I've had roommates that just like one of my roommates was like being abused by a parent, and I gave them a space to live, and they just had never learned how to be an adult. So like they were eating food that was that belonged to other people, or like, you know, taking like all the Advil, or just like grabbing all the toilet paper after I went grocery. And I had to sort of teach this person, like, okay, if you're gonna, like, you know, be an adult, you've got to like. But it was, I was like, I understand where you're coming from, and you're a friend of mine. So it was like this gradual, like, okay, like, I would like you to get a job and start paying rent after this amount of time. I would like you to like pay for your own stuff, but like, there's like, within reason, I can also help you out while you're learning this stuff and also recovering from just the trauma of that situation. Yeah, and
Yeah, their parents.
They're lucky to have you.
Yeah. So before we get to the main topic, did you have more feedback?
Yeah. I just wanted to say that I was specifically talking about consensual and healthy relationships,
yeah,
which also have problems and tend to end at some point. And when I say relationships, that does not mean sex. It can.
It doesn't
but
not mean sex.
Yeah. And but they're not abusive. And it's really important to differentiate between a healthy relationship and an abusive relationship, especially when you're talking about basing civil rights off of those circumstances.
I know a lot of people who would say that it is impossible for a 30-year-old to have a non-abusive relationship with a 15-year-old.
I totally disagree with that.
I think it's bullshit, but that is a line of thinking in our society that is pushed strongly by a lot of people.
When I had the thing with the college professor, though, I was 20 or 21, and they were like 36 or 37. It could have been fine. That was a coercive relationship.
And you were 21 and in an abusive relationship.
Yeah, like
you had made it past the magic age.
But like just the power differential between, you know, teacher-student relationship, and then like also the fact that he made more money and like had a house and I didn't.
And he had 1.5 more decades of manipulating people than you did.
Yeah.
So like that gives him more just skill with which to fuck you over.
Hopefully.
Whereas if you were with your peers, you have about equal experience fucking each other over and being fucked over by them, right?
Why are we hanging around with people that have experience fucking people over anyway? Like, I wouldn't want to have peers that have a lot of experience fucking people over, because I just don't like people that fuck other people over.
We're talking about bad relationships.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah.
Don't.
So in that context,
Sure.
You won't be as ill-equipped to combat your peers in a bad relationship than you would be somebody who's got a decade and a half seniority.
In this case, also, like, I was sort of groomed, sort of the same way, you know, like a child predator would groom a kid online or whatever. But like, this was after my best friends died, and I didn't have any friends in college. So this person slowly befriended me, and took a long time building up the relationship before it started becoming abusive and coercive.
Yeah. Classic behavior.
At which point, like, you're kind of already invested. And then it was also like, well, this is kind of sucks, but also I don't really have anybody else to hang out with. So like, if he wants me to suck his dick occasionally, maybe that's just something that I'll just put up with.
And that is something that can happen to any vulnerable person at any age.
Yeah, right. I could have been older than him,
to
too.
be taken advantage of by someone who's manipulating you.
Yeah.
So at some point, we all deal with that. And sometimes the person is your age, and sometimes they're not. But it's never an equal playing field when one of you is at an emotional disadvantage.
Yeah, there's different kinds of power differentials that aren't just age, or, you know, there's status, there's
vulnerable
someone being your boss or whatever.
Moments in your life. We all go through that. I mean, who hasn't looked back at like a friendship, job, or situation, a relationship? We have another human being going, I wasn't in a good place, or that never would have flown.
In retrospect, that was a terrible decision.
Yeah. So I think overall, that was a really, I think you guys have done a great job discussing difficult topics, and I want to encourage you all to continue. And
Thank you.
I hope I can contribute next time.
I'm glad also that you're doing a good job at pointing out like where we could improve, because that is important to me too. I don't want to like get butthurt about, you know, or I don't want you to like feel like we're going to get butthurt about you like criticizing stuff like us not defining terms, because actually that's important feedback. I really like just jamming with Steven and Ineash. I know some people have said that they actually like just enjoy hearing that, and they don't care as much about like us staying on topic because it just feels like hanging out with friends. But then there's other people that like Phoenix, for example, doesn't listen to very many of these episodes because it's just like too off topic, and that bugs them.
I came up with the term digressathon.
Not a bad word for it. Yeah, no, I appreciate I can't say it better than Jay said it. I was going to make last remarks on the last thing, but I already spent enough time talking about last episode. I don't want to go back to another episode. So, but no, that was good. It's fun to talk about, and it's engaging, and more important to revisit and get things articulate. So, yeah.
And as a final point, I think this kind of live listener feedback thing is kind of fun. So if anyone does have something to say about an episode that we have recently put out and would like to come on the show for live listener feedback, I think we could accommodate them.
Yeah, I mean, usually we record at the same time every other week, so it'd be more like them accommodating us.
Right.
But,
yeah. If you're willing to come on, around the early afternoon on a Sunday, and we can get you in on Zencaster and maybe have a little 10, 15-minute live feedback thing.
Alternately, if that doesn't work for you too, you can always send in like an audio question.
I was just going to say that, yeah. I actually like that format in other podcasts that I listen to where people sort of just call in, like, I guess, almost like an advice show, sort of like, hey, I have a question about such and such. And we could also sort of cut up the audio clip if there's multiple things, and then it sounds better than us just sort of reading a text comment and replying to it. Although that's also a thing. It's just we get a lot more of those, and it's harder to sort of like skim through all of those.
Yeah, talk to us more on more stuff.
Well, thank you for joining us, Charlie, and kicking off the first live listener feedback.
Yay! Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Charlie.
I have one last thing, actually, because David Spearman added me on Discord and was like, what are you talking about that young people can make an impact in the world or something? That was their first point. We hammered on that for a minute, where it's like young adults can't make an impact or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I pushed back on that because I didn't know what you meant by can't or impact. So it might have been just a game of Taboo that we should have played earlier. But I think the common understanding of that was not what I was using. There was some miscommunication. Like, I don't think you're ever, until you're, once you're able to mentally model other people, so 3 or 4. But at some point, and then once you're old enough to care, which might take you until you're 40 or maybe take you till you're 10, who knows, you're able to make your corner of the world a little brighter place. That's what I meant by have an impact.
Okay.
And like, sure, you can have more if you have more money, maybe, but not if you're not helping people primarily through money. You can be a supportive friend without having to give them $10,000, right? So
I guess
that's the kind of thing I was talking about.
What I meant by make an impact is do something that is important to people that you care about.
That's kind of what I mean.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that it takes a driver's license or a bank account to do that. Those might help,
but it does take being respected. Like, if your efforts are ignored, sidelined, what do I want to say? Brain vocabulary glitch.
I see what I think.
Access file.
I think I see what you're saying, though. That's a good point. That helps me understand that, because it might be important to you at 8 years old. Like, you want to help contribute to your parents, maybe help with dinner or whatever, right? But they're like, oh no, you go over here and pretend to chop onions, and we'll do it without you. Is that kind of like a scaled down version of what you're talking about?
Yeah. So I think everyone can relate to this because it'll happen to you at some point in your life. You want to contribute. You're with a group that you want to belong with. You want to be a part of and fit in, and you want to contribute, but you're not as good at what everyone's doing as
so
they are, because you're a
devalue
beginner.
your input.
They literally take it out of your hands and push you aside. And so you're robbed of the opportunity to contribute, or they give you busy work, like something that basically doesn't matter, but basically it's about not being respected.
Being an adult is a lot like that too. Being a legal adult in the United States.
We can all we've all had this done to us. So I think we can relate. But when you're in an ageist world, this will apply to anyone at any age. You're going to experience being pushed aside because you don't belong to that group, because you're not the right age. And it's always dehumanizing and hurtful, and I think it's complete bullshit.
The age segregation thing bugs me, honestly. Like, I bring a lot of library examples up, but like, there were some really smart little kids, and I remember just watching a few times, there would be like a kid teaching an older person how to use email, and then like at one point somebody got scared about adult predators, and so they're like, oh, we have to have the kids section of the library and keep the kids in the kids section, and the adults aren't allowed to go in there unless they like have a child or are, able to prove that they're looking for a book for the I don't know, whatever the heck.
And the kids aren't allowed to come out.
Yeah, well, that was they were confined to the kids section.
Yeah.
Like, unless they had an adult like supervising them, or like they were doing some kind of club where, yeah, again, they would have an adult supervising them, or they would be in their own little like meeting room. Had to keep them all separate.
Part of that sounds like really well-intentioned but misguided coddling. Right?
Yeah.
And wouldn't
Which,
you know it?
speaking of,
Yeah, the name of the essay that we were going to be talking about / book, but I didn't read the book because this is one of those examples where the essay. Thanks again, Charlie. You rock.
Bye.
There's another example where the essay is the book, but just more succinct. So the subject was The Coddling of the American Mind by Johnathan Haidt and Greg Lukianov. I'll put a link to the 2015 article in The Atlantic in the show notes, and or you can buy the 2018 book. But I haven't read it, but I'm convinced it just makes this point, but longer.
Some books are like that.
In my limited experience of reading like compelling essays and then subsequent books, that's always been the case. So I'm always reluctant. And if you want a better expansion of it or something, maybe that helps. Like I liked the Scout Mindset, even though I knew the point of it before I started reading it, and I didn't like learn much except for maybe some extra lingo. It was just more examples and more fleshed out. But I didn't learn a thing from animal liberation that I didn't learn in the 1975 essay, All Animals Are Equal, unless I wanted to learn a lot about 1970s factory farming, which I didn't. So,
but books also often have a lot of citations and references, which is very handy if you want to, if you're talking to someone who's like, well, I don't believe this, and you're like, okay, here's where the numbers came from.
Yeah.
I've definitely seen examples of both books that could have been like essays and probably should have been, but just like a book is a marketable format. But
some books are
also,
the real life definition of like this could have been this meeting could have been an email.
yeah, like it's clearly like there's info in there, but then they've like padded it out with enough filler to make it book sized, so they could then sell it as a book. But then I've seen books that will take a topic and really tackle it from a bunch of different angles, so you form a much more comprehensive model of the whole thing, and that's also really valuable.
That's a good point. And I take back what I said about all the time of my reading that with my reading with books, because I haven't read The Coddling of the American Mind, the book. Maybe it's great. Maybe it's way better than the essay. And it's 3 years newer, which means lots of new data on the subject, because a lot of this stuff was like newer in 2015 than it is.
Yeah, and a lot of stuff was changing in that time period too. Like you were talking about, what was it? Truancy. Truancy was older than that, but just like the
Kids at the Park thing.
The greater incidence of parents being scared to just let their kids play outside unsupervised.
Yeah, totally.
Even though like the world has actually been getting a lot safer.
Absolutely. And last thing, just before we dive in, another good example of a book that definitely deserves to be a book and not an essay was The Elephant in the Brain. Like I knew signaling. I knew what that was. But having 15 or 20 chapters of specific examples was awesome. That book was epic. So plug for that again. Anyway, it's worth pointing out that Lukianov and Haidt are, I'll probably just say Haidt for shorthand for later, because most of my context on this is like reading specifically what Johnathan Haidt had to say about it and listening to him on podcasts. So I haven't heard anything straight out of Greg Lukianov's mouth. So, but mainly they're talking about college campuses. They talk a bit about earlier stuff, which is why I tied into like our stuff about children and teens and tweens and young adults and all that, because I think that plays into a lot of the same stuff. Some of the mismanagement of children and young adults has been carried through into college in some places, and their main point is that really fucks them up and fucks us up. While it fucks society because they're fucked up, right? Okay.
So
they don't use the word fuck that much, but that's basically their point.
So treating adults like children has bad consequences.
Well,
of the fucked variety.
Yes, but then it's not clear, because now you've got adults, in their 20s who behave like who think this is all virtuous and awesome, and it's not clear. I think you got to jump
into examples or tell us like what's going on.
Yeah. But I was going to say, I don't think you can make the case that how did you put it? That treating
adults like kids
messes them up. Yeah, I mean, because I don't think it can be parsed that neatly, because now you have adults treating adults like what they think adults should be treated like.
The essay title, "The Coddling of the American Mind," so we could just say Americans or minds. Honestly,
sure. Yeah,
this is sort of being imposed upon society. It's they targeted college campuses, but you do see it in other realms as well.
Yeah, we can start with the college stuff because that's where the essay starts. So they're they basically talk about, and I'll get this at the top because it's a lot of the beats fall back on these three great untruths as they call them, which are like these are things that are perpetuated as either virtuous or just the way you should think, which fly in the face of all of modern and ancient wisdom and modern psychology.
Okay.
So those three things are: what doesn't kill you makes you weaker, always trust your feelings, and life is a battle between good and evil, or good people and evil people, rather.
Huh.
I like that you brought up that this is sort of the exact opposite of what CBT teaches, because I'm already sort of like gearing up to be like angry about it.
Yay! Oh yeah, I think I said this before we started recording that I was going to lean on Jace for for his expertise on cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT for syllable saving, because Lukianov had I think severe depression and maybe PTSD as an adult, and maybe as a youth as well. But the point is that like as he's observing these things on campuses, he's like they're putting on a pedestal exactly what my therapists have been teaching me not to do.
Okay.
And there's no way this is good for them. And the more you look, it turns out it's not.
Yeah. PTSD is actually way more common than I think most people know. There's people that just have like, that they actually have the acronym HSPs, highly sensitive people, which is funny, but that's actually just a psychological phenomenon where some people are more resilient and some people are more easily traumatized.
I wonder how much of that is culturally imbued.
Some probably is. It's probably like a lot of things, part like nurture, part nature, but there's definitely a biological component.
I think if you get a lot of rewards for being highly sensitive, it pushes you towards that direction.
Yeah, and I mean that could be in the form of peer recognition or validation, or even just like time off of school.
Right. I mean, it's just basic incentives, right?
Yeah.
If you get rewarded for something, you get more of that thing.
But it could also just well be the case that like, yeah, look, I drew the short stick. Turns out things fuck me a lot harder than they fuck you.
Right.
And that's also just going to be part of reality.
Mm-hmm.
I remember like learning about this, and you know, it was like a long debate in the history of psychology and social science of like, is X trait or is everything like nurture or nature?
Mm-hmm.
And like the obvious answer has always been both.
Right.
Right. Like it doesn't matter what great genes you have. If I mess you up enough as a kid, you're going to be a messed up adult, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if I work sufficiently hard to the task, doesn't matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Alternately, you could be somebody with highly sensitive person disorder. I don't think it's a disorder, personality type, and have great parents and a great support system, and grow up to be way healthier than like a lot of your peers.
Yeah. Let's see. Like I said, so because they're both professors, like most of their examples start from that. And then they move back to, all right, where did this come from and why did it start in the 90s, et cetera. But the article starts off mainly focusing on examples of higher education institutions, mostly expensive liberal schools.
Okay.
This isn't a thing in like conservative dominated areas, as it turns out, at least not as much.
But isn't it the case that most institutions of higher learning tend to skew really liberal?
Yeah, but like in liberal areas as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this is I think a trend, not like a golden rule. So if you find an example from a university in Georgia, you know, I don't think that invalidates where they're coming from, but it does turn out to just be a more common university phenomena among like liberal populations.
So am I wrong about this, or my stereotype is that generally people who are more conservative come from a more rural and or working class background? Is that fair?
That's probably like not unfair sweeping generalization.
Because it also seems to me that people who are more of the rural and or working class background, their children are more likely to be put to some productive ends earlier in their life and treated more like people that can contribute.
And this can help you like get an insight into the conservative mindset where you're like, why do they think that, you know, handouts are such a bad thing? It's like, well, because since they were kids, they've been working for things and getting rewarded, you know, getting compensation for it, right?
Yeah.
So like they've been like, I've been doing this since I was 10. Why can't you do it when you're 35?
Mm-hmm.
So like it doesn't make one person like it might be factually right or wrong, but it's not obviously right or wrong, right?
Right.
Anyway, so like some of the insane examples they point out just to kind of kick off like the university stuff. And keep in mind, this was 6 years ago. Like things have gotten weirder since then. Apparently, Jeannie Suk wrote an online article for the New Yorker about law students asking her fellow professors at Harvard not to teach rape law, or in one case, even use the word violate, as in that violates the law, lest it cause student distress.
Oh, so just censoring the word rape?
And violate.
Well, censor the word violate, but then like stop teaching rape law entirely?
Apparently, in Harvard.
That's going to make it harder to be a criminal lawyer.
Imagine, and so that's where the weird part of this is coming up. And so in 2015, this was kind of like an emerging thing. It wasn't like brand new, but now we're 6 years out of that. A lot of people have graduated Harvard Law, and they're so traumatized by the word rape that they can't represent you in a case like that. I mean, how weird would that be, right?
I don't
like
think
you go to your lawyer and they're like, "I'm sorry, can you not use the R word?"
I don't think that's actually a thing that happens with real lawyers, though, right? Like this is just something that they were doing in school to exercise power over their professors.
This is something they proposed. Did they actually stop teaching rape law?
I didn't follow up with it. I doubt it. I feel like that's an important part of criminal law. And while it's probably not true in lawyering, it is true in other avenues of life. Some of the weird virtues that are coming out of this have perpetuated into the adult workforce, or the college graduate workforce, where 20-somethings are employed next to, or are gainfully employed in the world, right?
So I agree with you that this is something that absolutely happens. I don't know if Haidt makes this point or if this is just commonly thought to be the Haidt.
Yeah,
sorry, if he claims this or if this is just a thing that's commonly thought, but it seems to be implied that these people are actually harmed by these things, and thus that is why they're I don't want to say screaming. That is why they are strongly requesting these protections. But it has been my impression that these are ways to exercise power. That these are things that people have found they can use to exercise power over their professors, or to get more senior people in their organization kicked out and open up space for them to move up. Like, I don't know if maybe secretly on the inside they really do feel hurt by this, but in all practical purposes, it looks much more like a way to exercise power over others, or to eliminate opposition with these weapons that you have at your disposal. Because society does accept, like, oh no, he was so triggered by that word that now we have to make special exceptions.
Yeah, I don't know how to dive into that, because it's not always trying my hand at mind reading, trying to understand these things, but it is often like, I don't know the motives. Like if somebody, like there was that famous video that went around a few years ago of all those students screaming at the dean at Yale because Halloween costumes. Yeah. And like, were they really so hurt and affronted that they were acting like a 1960s civil rights protest?
It really just strikes me as signaling, which I think is what Iniash is getting at. But I doubt that there's like individual professors sort of sitting in their offices, like petting their cat and like evilly cackling as like, I will, take over the, I don't know, like push out all the like conservative professors so liberal professors could take over the whole. But like that's becomes sort of the effect, and I think that it's sort of the way signaling works, because it's like, oh, well, I think my tribe is the more moral one and that we're correct, so we should fight these fights. But it gets to the point where it's like, do you actually care about these issues? Like, is this your real objection, or are you just tricking yourself into like making yourself feel good about just doing signaling games?
Well, it's not just about kicking out conservative professorship either. Like there was at the top of the article was someone who wrote under pseudonym, and the title was, "I'm a liberal professor and my liberal students terrify me." Haidt talks about how in every bathroom at where does he teach?
I don't see it in the article. It doesn't say where they were teaching.
Like, I don't think any of the students that were yelling at the dean felt hurt by those costumes necessarily. Maybe like a little bit of offense. They
were offended that other people might get offended.
I mean, I think more than anything, like the dean is super liberal too. It's not like they were trying to chase out a conservative faculty member, but it felt good to be part of a self-righteous mob that can hurt this person in a position of power. And so they jumped on that. That's the whole point of being in a mob, right? It feels good to be on the righteous side and beat up the evil people. Mm-hmm. And that was a tool that you could use to beat someone up.
I've like talked about this on a bunch of other episodes, but I was really concerned about how witch hunts became really popular and continue to be really popular on like websites like Tumblr. I guess just like a lot of social media, but for some reason Tumblr in particular became really polarized with like the start of the anti-movement, which ostensibly is anti-pedophilia, but actually it is just a way of, inciting a mob and witch hunting. For example, like if somebody drew a aged up Steven Universe and Connie from the show Steven Universe, like maybe not even like doing anything sexual, but like I'm trying to think of better examples here.
Or in a case where they drew fan art and the kid wasn't drawn fat enough and they bullied the kid into suicide, either into a suicidal depression or literal death.
It's funny that actually I've seen that go both ways too, where like there's artists that will draw characters in different body types or of different races because they're just, I guess, experimenting with diversity or like sometimes, the best example I can think of is when there's like sprite characters in video games, so you don't actually know what their canon appearance is. So sometimes people will like, oh, what if it was like a black trans woman, and then like people will attack that person for no, that's not canon. But then there's the other case of like, yeah, Steven's canonically fat and you drew him like thin, so that's fat phobia. It's like a real bad situation for artists if you're trying to draw anything, because somebody's going to take some kind of offense to it. And it seems like it's literally just people who feel disenfranchised want to gang up and attack people because it makes them feel powerful. It's a form of bullying.
It's absolutely a kind of bullying. And I think, it's in the case of, watching or, going to someone's website, their Tumblr, and seeing a Steven Universe art that you don't like, and then you act like you've been attacked or assaulted or had violence done against you, whatever insane words they want to attribute to this. I'll try to be more charitable and not just call it insane. But there is a lot of misuse of the words like violence and aggression and attacked.
Well, I mean, I've seen artists get death threats.
Right.
Or even like some people will get like swatted or doxxed.
Oh, the artists are getting literally attacked and having violence done to them. I meant the person who goes to Steven Universe fanarttumblr.com and they see an art that they don't like. The person who visits that site says, I've been attacked because this is fatphobic. And it's like, no, I just didn't draw it the way you thought I would draw it. How about you go fuck yourself or draw your own? Which is how people usually would handle a disagreement like that, right? Maybe more politely. If you go to a club and they're playing music you don't like, you don't get to demand that you change the music because I don't like this genre or I don't like this artist, right? Yeah. That's sort of how I view online spaces, which isn't really talked about in the article, at least not much. Like
the extra level of anonymity makes it extra insidious because, and also the connectedness, because you could go see that art and not like it and then go cross post it somewhere that has like thousands of followers and say, look at what this asshole did, let's attack them. And then suddenly that artist is getting like mobbed with death threats. I've seen like, I'm pissed off. Some of my favorite artists have been chased off of social media entirely. Some of them have quit art or quit posting it, and that makes me really mad. One of my favorite artists actually was a professional artist, and also had like a fan art blog, and they were so harassed by people. And this was somebody who did have mental health issues and some PTSD, and they were just like, all right, it's been a few years where I've tried to fight for like against this insanity. I'm quitting art and I'm going to go like learn to be a welder. And they went to welding school and they got like a good paying job in welding. And they're like, you know what? Like nobody gives me shit about like that I've welded this thing wrong unless it's like, structurally unsound. Like,
unless it's actually wrong.
They're like, this is the most relaxed that I've felt like in years. I don't know why I put myself through trying to be an artist for that long. Mm-hmm. And it's just so fucking disappointing for me because I was like, I love this person's art and I'm mad that they're not creating like cool shit anymore. I guess they're creating cool welding shit, but it's mostly industrial. It's not art. It's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Not to diss craft skills, just
no, you're good. And that's the thing is, it's I'm getting myself a little out of order on this, but it's fine because this is a sort of was a topic. But I have this weird, well, not weird. I have this knee-jerk, not understanding and frank dismissal of anybody who comes into an online space and demands that they be accommodated.
Yeah,
this isn't. They act like any Tumblr they come across or any Discord server they're on needs to comply with their version of the Americans with Disabilities Act, where it's like, if I want to go to the bank and I'm in a wheelchair, you better find a way to let me in. I'm on board with that, right? That was a good move of the United States.
But there's taking things too far where it's like, I'm offended by your art, so therefore I'm going to demand you like take it down or like write a public apology. I don't even know actually if there's a way that you can save yourself in that case.
There's not, as it turns out.
Well, there were like movie directors that were, if they find a off-color tweet out of context years before that they've since apologized for, but like, yeah, I don't know, your name's smeared now.
Yeah.
And even if you like write a public apology, people are just gonna like be, I don't know, still mad about it and find other things to be upset about.
Well, I mean, I'll touch on the apology thing in just a second. I was just my analogy with the ADA was like my website doesn't need to comply with this bad analogy of like your version of the ADA, right? If you don't like looking at pictures of corgis, don't come to my website. Right? You don't get to come to my website and be like, I demand that you only show pictures of non-purebred dogs because purebreeding is bad for dogs. Like, no, you start your own website and post pictures of non-purebred dogs. Like, that never made any sense to me, and I've seen that happen on multiple occasions online. I barely get out online. That's the thing.
Yeah, the thing that really the worst example of this is a lot of universities were putting up their lectures for free on YouTube because. I don't know. You can just learn things for free. You don't get the credential, but whatever. Who cares? It costs them nothing to take the video that they're recording anyway and put it on YouTube for people too. And then there were a bunch of ADA requests that said, if you don't close caption this, we will sue you. And they don't have the money to go and get everything, transcripted and closed caption. They were just throwing it out there on YouTube as a free service. So they took it down instead. And now a lot of free educational material has been taken down because of these people getting all upset, I guess, that it wasn't closed captioned for the hearing impaired.
If this was able to get you credentialed and like that sort of thing, and it was part of the institution's education curriculum, you have to absolutely comply, right? Make it so everyone can learn because you've come to do that. If you come across a video online and it's like, I'm sorry, this doesn't work for you, but also this seems like it must be a few years old because YouTube does closed captioning. They do that.
Yeah. They're not super accurate all the time, but like
but they're about as good as you can get for free right now, so I definitely like think that there are reasonable requests and like contexts for them. A great example is the like, hey, I'm deaf and I would like to also access this material, and it's also reasonable of them to say, sorry, we don't have like this is a free thing that we're offering, but we just don't have the bandwidth to be able to do that. And maybe here's some resources or whatever. But like one of the things that really gets me about this is how often the people that are inciting the mobs aren't even a member. Like usually it would be someone who's not even a deaf person just saying there could be a deaf person. Like, or I see so much social justice that is actually like, I find this offensive because this is often people who do not belong to that group speaking for that group. For example, like a bunch of white people saying that sounds racist, and then like I've asked black friends before, like, is this offensive to you? And they would laugh and be like, well, no, that's like the shit that I would say to my friends all the time. Like, or
no, you can't bring that up though, because then you have your token black friend.
I guess, but like
that you're using as a shield.
This is a lose engagement, as it turns out.
So what does this? Why is this a? Bring us back to the article.
So it's trying to explain where some of these behaviors came from and other ramifications that it has, including like new norms at workplaces, some beneficial, some probably not so beneficial, and increasing political polarization, which has gone way up in the last couple of decades as opposed to the previous decades. There used to be a lot more cross-aisle communication than there is now, because now there's just this, again, you build up Untruth 3, it's a battle of good people versus evil people, and if they disagree with you, they're evil people, right? Or they offend you. But yeah, Jace's point of and it's just easy to get sidetracked, but I got to raise my hackles on that for a second. I've never understood getting offended on behalf of somebody else. I can understand that. Let me rephrase that, because I can understand that. I went to a movie once with half a dozen coworkers some years ago, and the one black person among us, because we all had our backpacks, we're all coming from work. The person wanted to see inside his backpack. And I stopped and I was like, why do you want to see just inside his? We're all carrying backpacks. And she's like, oh, just safety thing. And if I had been more ballsy, I would have made what would I have done, right? Like, so I could have at least said, that's horseshit, you're being racist, fuck you, and just kept, gone to the movie. I think that might have been the nice silver lining.
Mm-hmm.
Just told her that was shitty of you and called it at that.
Mm-hmm.
The person who had to show their backpack didn't mind. I'm assuming this happens all the time because people suck.
Yeah, I've actually often seen people that are like, can you just not make a big deal about it? Like, I actually hate when, I know that some people have different opinions about this, but if somebody misgenders me and then like somebody on my behalf is like, hey, like Jace uses he, him pronouns and that was and I was just like, you know what? I actually like, can you just not make a big deal about it? Especially if they like catch themselves and corrected themselves and then someone continues yelling at them. But like, even like, most of the time I'm like, I actually like don't want you to like fight for my representation. I'm trying to have a nice time right now. And you're just like, people have different like, sort of opinions about this. I know people that would be really happy if someone spoke up for them. But for me, I'm just sort of like, I don't know. I'm not like actually that easily offended by stuff like that. And it's often not the time or place to talk about that. If the person does want me to explain trans stuff, I'd be happy to, but I don't want to just like be talking about elephants or whatever, and then so it suddenly turns into a social justice argument on my behalf that I didn't even like want to bring up.
Yeah, you know what? You make me feel better about my very tepid reaction to this ticket taker at the movies because he was already ahead. I think he was one or two people ahead of me getting into the through the queue, and he didn't. I talked with her at this volume. The one you would when you're saying, "Here's my ticket," and I kind of just asked her what was up with that. I didn't make a big stink. I didn't drag him over and, look at how you made him feel. I have no idea how she made him feel, right? I'm assuming not great, but
like that would have just maybe made him feel worse if he was just like, okay, whatever, like, and he deals with this all the time. But like, if you drag him out there and then like, or like, look at like that's like the whole idea of the coddling thing, right? It's the sort of like, you hurt my friend's feelings. It was very fragile, and you should get like, that's embarrassing.
That's definitely one avenue of it. Yeah, I didn't really put his feelings into account when it was a 15-second exchange with this person. It was more just like,
I mean, it could have been
me pointing out that
I'm
was
offended
shitty.
by you having done that because I think that was a shitty thing to do. Like, and then you're not making it about the other person.
I basically just said, why'd you choose just him when we all have bags? And kind of had to make her, I was just doing routine security. And I'm like, on the one person? And, it was just those basically 2 lines. It was a few years ago. But yeah, I didn't try to presume how he felt about it because it wasn't about necessarily his feelings on the subject. Just more about like, hey, I hope you're not doing this to every fucking black person who comes in here. That's kind of shitty of you. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's a bit aside. I mean, I guess I wasn't even offended on his behalf as offended on behalf of decent society.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what every person who, if they're not fat and they see a fat Steven Universe or thin Steven Universe picture, they're offended on behalf of decent society as well.
Yeah, it could be like one of those people who is just incredibly empathetic and is able to put themselves in the shoes of somebody who might see this and get hurt. Like, not all of these people are just doing this to sort of cyberbully people. Definitely, some people are definitely doing it for that reason. But I don't even know if they are aware that they're doing it for that reason. I think that they genuinely, like, nobody believes that they're the bad guy. They probably have convinced themselves that they're like a social justice warrior. When I first heard that term, I thought it sounded awesome before people started doing this stuff. But like I used to be like, I'm all about social justice. That sounds great. I would love to have a society that's more like equal and aware of diversity.
I was proud of the term as well. Yeah.
Until it started turning into this weird, like, just sort of political signaling bullying thing that's defeating the purpose, sort of.
I think there's definitely people who are good-natured about it. And I want to talk about that, explicitly at some detail before we, before too long, because I don't want to say like this is all terrible and everyone who does it is the worst. But there is a faction of it that is explicitly malicious. There are parts of what do you call your political team when you're running for office? Your
campaign. Your
campaign staff.
Okay.
There are campaign staffers whose job it is. And it's not every politician everywhere, but it goes at least as far as like South Africa, including, and so, and parts of the United States, but it's not like just local to the US, where it's their job to comb through the opposition's social media presence thoroughly and as far back as possible and try and find something to misconstrue so that then you can drag that out in front of the crowd and say, look, in 2015, they said this terrible thing about bathrooms and who can use them or something. And So like there is a part of it that is explicitly there to just try and rile people up so you can win, and it's not about caring about the subject whatsoever. It's about caring about you.
Wasn't that one of Donald Trump's strengths, though? That he said, like, yeah, I don't care what you say about me. Bring it on. I give no fucks about what you're going to find in my backstory and my social media.
I think
You know what? I'll say something even worse. Bring it.
Yeah, that people, I can kind of see why people admired that about him. I sort of wish that, because like I think the accepted correct response up till that point had been to, oh well, I want to deeply apologize for that thing that I said that I already apologized for, but I just want to like remind everybody that this no longer represents my views, and I'm going to grovel before you, so I'm not going to lose you as my voting crew.
Or if somebody accused a real human politician of like sexual misconduct, they would say they would find some polite way to engage with it, not say you're way too ugly for that have been realistic, right? Which is another Trumpian response to a sexual assault allegation.
I really think that a lot of businesses and society in general would be better off taking the Trump approach to these sort of things. Like when Apple hired that one guy, and he wrote some from the few pieces I saw, some like pretty bad shit like 10 years ago, as part of like, I don't know, some kind of shock reporting, kind of like a Howard Stern sort of level stuff, which, yeah, that's not great what he wrote. It's pretty bad actually. But, Apple looked through it. They hired him anyway. He's got skills that they want. And then like they launch a social media campaign. At some point, Apple's just got to say, I'm not letting the rest of I'm not letting the most offended people on Twitter make my decisions for me. And I think most companies would be much better served doing that, as well as most humans in general.
Are you talking about Antonio Garcia Martinez?
I don't know. The guy who wrote something about Silicon Valley. Yeah, that guy.
What you said about him writing something that was actually fairly contemptible and Howard Sterny, it was the exact opposite. It was extremely tepid.
I know what you're thinking of.
They drew one sentence out of context, which is another tactic of this whole mindset.
Because you're thinking about the Sam Harris podcast, right?
Yeah.
They literally stopped reading his quote right before he got to the bad stuff, which kind of made me...
They summarized the part that he said the bad stuff, didn't they?
No. That kind of made me like trust Sam Harris a little bit less, because like... And he stopped right there and was like, and the rest of it was basically like this too. But like, if you actually read it, the rest of it is where it really got spicy. And I really think that Sam Harris was being intellectually dishonest by stopping there and not reading that and being like, but this does sound pretty shitty, dude.
Well, then I walked away with the wrong impression. I will give Sam the benefit of the doubt there only because they were doing it with Antonio leading the conversation and reading as much of it as he was comfortable with doing.
Yeah, but he should have pressed him on that.
He should have pressed him, yeah. But I can see why he didn't say, well, hold on, let me finish reading this. And
let's read the next two sentences, sir.
Yeah. But yeah, that's interesting. I walked away with thinking that all he had said that, his wife was way more interesting than the average Silicon Valley girl because she was like actually cool or something. Yeah. Which, again, dismissive and rude, but like fairly lukewarm, right?
Right.
But if it was worse than that, then yeah, Harris did the world a disservice by not being forthcoming about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, the reason I wanted to talk about the Coddling of American Mind, because basically, I said, hey, I'm busy this week. Who wants to think of a topic? And I was thinking about the subject anyway, and it tied into the youth thing. And so part of how we're fucking up kids is doing
young adults.
No, kids.
Okay. So part of how we're fucking up people below the age of 13.
This is
Okay.
So this ties into the kid stuff, not the young adult stuff, the children thing.
Okay.
Apparently this started in the early 90s, but it must have not have got to my neck of the woods till the 2000s, because I did have a free reign childhood
in like the early 2010s coming to my attention.
The child which part?
I thought you were saying just like sort of the beginning of terms like microaggressions and trigger warnings and wokeness.
No, I was thinking younger.
Something below prepubescent.
Yeah, so as prepubescent stuff, but yeah, we'll talk about the terms too if we get a chance, because I didn't come very organized. I guess now you can tell, I shouldn't organize this episode.
I think you're doing pretty good, actually.
Well, the youth aspect of it came from like the overprotectiveness in a word, I guess you can call it that. He calls it safetyism, which is kind of fun because safety is a good thing. More safety sounds like a better thing, right? It turns out, as one might expect, too much of a good thing can lead to a bad thing. So
the middle way, always.
The idea of like wanting to know where your kids are so that you know if they haven't been home in X number of hours means that they
versus
might be hurt or
microchipping
dead.
them.
Right, versus microchipping them.
Or like actually just not letting them play outside out like you know, you were in the middle of a thought actually. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you're fine. But yeah, like, well, if my kid's outside and I don't know where they are, this was, again, too, some of the satanic panic from the 80s and abductions being like headline news all the time in the 90s, even though they almost never happened. And if it did, it was almost always family.
The world was actually getting safer, but like it was just the fact that, first of all, you had news at all, like, of this stuff made people more aware that it happened. Because, like, you know, stuff's happening in New York City or, like, I don't know, Minnesota or whatever, but, like, maybe there's never been a child abduction in your neighborhood, but now you're aware that they happen.
Right.
But, and then the other thing was that they started focus testing the news and figuring out that, like, outrage porn gets lots of views.
I'm convinced that's what started this.
Yeah.
Was that, hey, if we make people scared and mad, they'll watch our show more. And then that turned into how they monetized the internet as well.
Not just watch our show more. 24-hour news was not a thing until the first Gulf War, which was, what, 91?
Yeah.
I think? Yeah. That is when CNN, I mean, they'd already been kind of trying to do stuff and sort of struggling before, but then the Gulf War happened, and suddenly having a 24-hour news thing was really interesting because you could, at any time, click over to CNN and see what was going on in the war. And that was the era where 24-hour news really took off, and all the other stations started becoming big then too. And I mean, that's fine while there is a war and there's action going, but like,
but there's always a war somewhere in the world, and there's always a hurricane that's happened somewhere, and some child's been abducted, and some horrible like serial killers on the loose, and that's all the stuff that they were focusing on because it's the most sensational.
Yeah, if
there
you
was
have
never like, hey, this community got together to like save a beached whale, isn't that cool?
Well, not just that, but like when you have 30 minutes to an hour, usually the newscasts were 30 minutes long, where they covered all the important stuff that happened in the day in about, I guess, 22 and a half minutes with commercial breaks. And then once a week, there would be 1 or 2 1-hour news shows that like really dive deep into a subject, like an SSC blog post in TV format. But like once you have 24 fucking hours that you got to fill with news, and like you said, the outrage bad stuff is what really draws you to the eyeballs. You start looking for all the things you can find that might be newsworthy / scary and throwing them up on the air for 24 hours a day. And that'll fuck up people's psyche a bit.
Well, and it turns out it just fucked up parents.
Yeah.
So like boomers were way more protective of their kids on average than their parents were of them. And honestly, their parents probably could have been safer with them, and things would have been a little safer for them, right? For the boomers themselves.
I remember my dad talking about he and his friends playing a game where they would throw a knife at each other to like, what was it? Like you'd stand with your legs apart and then you get like further and further apart, and each person takes turns throwing a knife and trying to get it to land in the dirt between their feet.
Man, I'm glad I was never quite that dumb. Like my brother and I had like a weak ass plastic bow and arrow that we put a cork on the end of it, and we would shoot each other and try and catch it. But like,
oh shit!
But between that and airsoft wars, where at least we almost always wore sunglasses.
I don't think you could put out an eye even with airsoft. Maybe
no, but
it was within a few feet.
But it turns out if you get hit in the eyeball, it does burst blood vessels and really hurts the eye.
Okay.
My brother had a cool red circle on his eyeball for a while.
You get some like kind of gnarly bruises from it too, but like,
and it probably could have blinded him at just the right angle and close enough. I mean, those guns can break skin. If it can break your skin, it can break your eye.
It's true.
They're still probably safer than just throwing knives at each other.
Totally. That's what I'm saying. Is I thought we were dumb, but so you know, this is where the well-intentioned part of it needs to be emphasized, right? Because if we want to pass a law against kids throwing knives at each other, I think that's probably not a bad idea to do, right? Kids, not young adults, right?
Right.
Probably shouldn't let adults throw knives at each other either. But if you're 2 consenting adults in the privacy of your own home, you know, maybe that's fine. But not in the parking lot of Walmart or something.
I
right?
actually wish that just waivers were more common. Like,
and throwing knives at each other actually happens quite a lot in like juggling shows or various other performance.
Non-professionals shouldn't be allowed to throw knives at each other.
You're really qualifying a lot of things. Do they need a license to prove they're a professional knife thrower?
As Jay said, they probably need a waiver.
Okay.
if they fuck up and hit me, I can't sue them or the circus, right?
Yeah.
But and I'm qualifying it as a joke. Yeah, I mean it's one of those. Anyway, the idea of let's keep our kids safe. Partly because the news is making me think that every third kid is getting, abducted and raped.
Mm-hmm.
And I also just care about my kid, right? And there's also the actual real factor of some kids are in danger, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a bit of an aside, but I was listening. I mentioned to Sam Harris's episode of Neil deGrasse Tyson, and Harris always tries to rope him into talking about culture war stuff. And last time he was on, he kind of neatly sidestepped it, and this time he did a nice pirouette around it. He didn't engage with it directly, but he gave some good insight. And he did talk about how when he was 8, his mom gave him the talk of like, when you get stopped by the police, do this, because she didn't want to come home and learn that her kids were dead. So like, you know, for anyone who doesn't know, Neil deGrasse Tyson's black, so like that makes that talk from his mom have some serious fucking gravity. You know, when I got the talk of how to deal with police, there was never a threat of or they'll kill you. It was basically like, here's how you lower your chances of getting a ticket, which is when they come to the car, have the window down, engine off, have your license registration ready. Like that is how I handle every time I get pulled over. And anyway, like that. But my talk of how to deal with the police was never involved like, or they might kill you. That wasn't even implied, as far as I know. If it was implied, they didn't imply it successfully. Anyway, so that this level of kid protecting extends especially to places where kids go, like schools. Zero tolerance policies became really popular. No ifs, ands, or buts. You fuck up, you're out. We're not dealing with it. Because if we have to have tolerance, that means we have to have discretion, which means we can be held liable, right? So I don't know if Haidt makes that point, but that's been my hobby horse for a long time. Whereas like, you're expelled because you hit that kid. It's like, yeah, I hit him because he kept hitting me, and you notice I'm missing 2 teeth. And it's like, yeah, well, we have a zero tolerance policy for violence. If you engaged in violence, you're out. I think that's mainly to protect the school from anyone saying, well, look, you know, you made a bad judgment call. It's like, actually, we didn't make a judgment call.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can't hold us accountable. But so this ties into one thing that I've observed in real life with, I think, legal adults. It's hard to say with online anonymity, but the idea of always having a responsible adult around. That wasn't a thing when I was a kid. And I'm glad I get to say that because it makes me sound old, but I guess my childhood was just 10 years behind some other parts of the country, because when I was a kid, I left the house and my parents wouldn't know where I was for hours. I would say, I would literally, you know, I'm going to run around with this guy. We're going to go have fun. And like, all right, well,
they would kind of know. You were with that guy, you were in the neighborhood.
Somewhere, probably. Yeah. I mean, we could, within 45 minutes, jog to downtown Fort Collins. We could be miles up that way. I mean, if I did fall and break my leg, they would never find me, you know? I wasn't like at his house or at my house. We would be somewhere, and we found every little niche, every gap between fences to jump and run across, every ditch, every drainage pipe that you could crawl into and light fires. And
I was always scared to go in drainage pipes.
We had one that we'd go into a lot, and it got harder when we got taller, but so, I mean, that says something, the fact that we're still growing when we're going into this thing, right? We would go in there and start fires.
Dumb aside, there's a whole community of people who do urban exploration, and then one of them, I forget if it's called draining, but like that's like a subculture of the sort of urban exploration community where people share information about where cool pipes are.
I like that.
How to get in, like, I don't know.
This just didn't even have a gate on it.
Of it, etc.
There's probably a grate on it now. I should go look next time I'm in the area. But
well, I always figured, I mean, I didn't go very far, but once you go inside past a turn or two, everything looks identical, and maybe you'll get stuck in there for days and starve to death because you can't find your way out again.
Luckily, from the surface, it was from about here to like the visitor spots across the parking lot, and it had one turn, and there was no branches.
Okay.
So I could see from like above both parts of it. It was just big enough to go in and have fun.
Cool.
But like the kind of childhood we had, we'd go in there with a can of Axe body spray and a lighter and shoot spiders with it, so that we could clear the place out for us, right?
I also used to set perfume on fire with friends because some of the chemicals or maybe just like the fragrances or dyes in there will make it burn really cool colors, and it probably wasn't great to breathe in retrospect.
Yeah,
but like
it's a very expensive flamethrower.
Yeah, and not that effective, but it did get the spiders, and I don't like spiders, so
I love spiders.
And Axe was the continuous spray, and so you could get them nice with that.
You could probably kill them without setting it on fire with spider spray. That stuff is noxious.
So this actually this is a nice kind of flashback to the discussion we were just having with Charlie about like kids being traumatized and stuff. Is like, I think it does make sense to protect kids from things that are overtly likely to harm them in very serious ways. Like, we were just lucky that none of these cans ever blew up on us without us meaning for it to. Like, it is actually not uncommon when you turn, like when you're doing, don't do this at home. Don't do this, period. But if you do, which you shouldn't, you have the lighter a few inches ahead of the flame, and you want to shoot a few inches ahead of the projectant, the spray, and you want to shoot the spray about an inch or two above the flame. You don't want to shoot it at the flame, lest it get on your thumb, and then the flame catch that.
Right.
And then when you're done, you turn the lighter off and move the can away at the same time, because like as the flame goes out and it just and if you stop pressing the diffuser, it stops pushing out and it kind of comes back this way. If it goes to the can, it can explode and blow your fingers off.
Okay.
So like it's things like that where I do think it makes sense to like try to protect kids, because kids don't like.
Well,
I knew abstractly when I was 13.
Teach your kids how to safely flamethrower spiders.
Don't tell my mom, but my dad told me how to do it.
I think that
Thank
there's
you.
lots
And
of dangerous things that
I
kids
learned from
do
other kids.
and have always done, and like most of the time they're fine or you get minor injuries. Sometimes it's sad, kids do die, but like also I think you can't really prevent that as a parent by just you can't predict everything that your kid might do, and sometimes they're just freak accidents, you know?
Yeah.
You could be walking in a forest path that you've been in all the time and there's a bear one time and just
That's why
kills
you always have one more kid than you actually want to have. So there's a
backup.
yes.
I was drawing a bad analogy to like saying where it kind of makes sense maybe to protect 14-year-olds from 35-year-old people who want to fuck them, because that seems like a circumstance where, yes, you could have a bad outcome that merely results in having regrettable sex, but it is like possible that kind of trauma can hit a lot deeper than if you merely got slapped by a 35-year-old. But the analogy here is like, you know, while I was told, yes, you can blow your hand up if you do it wrong, maybe my dad shouldn't have taught me how to do it in the first place, because I wouldn't have learned that all these cool things around the house are flammable.
You would have found out.
But maybe he showed me a couple years too early.
Okay.
And maybe he didn't. Maybe he did it at the right time. My memory's fuzzy. I just do distinctly remember him showing me, it was with like brake fluid or something, or brake parts cleaner. The kind of like a hose that shoots like 11 feet. Like it was like...
Well, I mean, I learned from other kids in school how to make basically a kind of homemade napalm thing.
styrofoam and gasoline?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Super easy. And apparently,
Really
I don't know where
inconvenience.
this came from, but also crush up one Advil or ibuprofen and put it in. That was just a thing. That was like an urban legend, magical ingredient in my area. I don't know where the hell that came from. Doesn't do anything. But it was a thing we all did because that gave it the little extra spice.
That's fun.
Yeah.
A couple Halloweens in a row, we went around with like a 2-liter, and we had, you know, you just spend the year collecting styrofoam, and then you shove it all into the container full of gasoline, and then you go out on Halloween and draw a shape on a wall and set it on fire, or draw a line across a back road and set it on fire.
Yeah, I was pretty good on only doing it like on asphalt or other things that wouldn't catch fire. You put it on walls?
Brick.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We weren't totally dumb.
All right, yeah.
We were stupid, but not doesn't know what catches on fire stupid.
Yeah.
I brought up this drainage tunnel thing though, because there was one time, like my dad knew we'd fuck around in there, and it was like kind of on his drive. It's a common way to get to and from like Safeway and stuff. You could see one side of it, and we had gone in there, and I remember which kid it was, threw a bunch of like pine bramble onto our little fire.
That son of a bitch.
Well, as you apparently know, that is very, very smoky.
Yeah.
And so we all vacated quickly at the other end because we couldn't breathe. And apparently the fire department showed up, and they were at the other end of it. And I'm assuming they were spraying water down or making sure there are no kids in there or some sort of big deal. And my dad saw that, but then he came home, like after he finished driving past it, we were at my place, and he was like, "Oh, that was you guys, right? You guys okay? Yeah, we're fine." And he's like, "Well, the fire department's there. Don't, go around." I'm paraphrasing from bad memories, but that's basically what went down. And
Don't go back to the scene of the crime for a while.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, but anyway, little mistakes like I bring all this up. It's a digression, but it drives the point home that, goofing around and being unmonitored as a kid gives you a lot of this agency and responsibility that Eneasz loves so much for young adults. I'm teasing. But in a good
true, I
natured
do
way.
like those things. Yeah.
But the dismissive quote unquote
It's
stuff
sort
was
of
teasing.
What Charlie was saying earlier, I mean, like, it applies to relationships, but also just things like skirting around with homemade napalm or whatever. You do your dumb shit and then you learn from it. I learned, for example, that you should not use a car battery to try to make an electromagnet.
Oh, damn. What happened?
Or made it might have been a Wave Runner battery, which would have been slightly smaller, but I was in my dad's workshop and I connected it for just a second until it like shorted out or just terrified me, and I disconnected it, but everything metal jumped toward me a bit. And I was in a like workshop full of like saws and hammers, and so I was just like, oh shit.
That's amazing.
That's cool.
I'm
'Cause
glad
I had made one with like a 9-volt, and then or not even a 9-volt, one of the like ones that's a big brick that you can kind of hold in your hand. I forget what that kind of battery is called. Is it C or D?
Yeah, C or D, those big ones.
something.
Like the big
And then I was
cube.
just like, oh, this, what would be cool is if I used a bigger battery. Like, I wonder how much, magnetism I could generate. It turns out a lot. But also you like knock everything out of all the cabinets and onto the
I
floor.
just see the Walter White van going thunk to the wall.
I'm glad you weren't hurt, but wouldn't it have been interesting for your, the newspaper, like you're ripped apart by every sharp thing in the office, and like it's not even clear what really happened. Like it looks like a ghost just ripped you to pieces and everything and shattered the whole workshop. Anyway, it's fun to humor about because nothing happened. So, yeah, but those little experiences, I said it as a joke, but I mean it very seriously. It gives you a sense of responsibility and accountability for your own stuff, and it's valuable. Anyway, there are great reasons to try and rein that in. And then it turns out it's not that hard to overcorrect. Like I came home once and I thought I'd cleaned up well enough, but I hadn't. And my mom was like, immediately, "What happened to you? Like, what happened?" And I was like, I named the kid, threw a fireball at me. And because we'd set a ball of newspaper on fire and threw it at me. And as I dodged, like the wind just blew it and it just like basically gave me a haircut.
Oh, neat.
And I thought I'd kind of, I don't know, combed over enough, but no, it was obvious that like from across the room the second I came home. And so, it's the kind of thing, if we had been goofing around a little more differently that day and I was, covered in some residual Axe body spray from one of our extermination missions or something, he could have set me on fire, right? So I get where parents are coming from. And I think it's hard not to understand why they have this protection. No one wants their kid to be burnt to a crisp because they're playing around with fire, right? So, but this gets stupid real fast, like when you pass a law and parents can get arrested. And again, I think you said that they're making this illegal. It's illegal to pass laws like this. I'm not sure what that means in the terms of legalities, but basically they're making it so you can't pass laws such as your 10-year-old is at the park down the street unattended and you're going to jail for child neglect.
Specifically, I think the Texas law was you can't call the cops on a kid being left in a park. That, I mean, I guess they still could, but the cops aren't supposed to respond, and the person who tried to do that would be the one that gets in trouble.
I wonder how young the kid's supposed to be. Because if I saw a baby in a park, I'd call the police. If it's just sitting there under a tree, clearly just...
I don't know if I'd call
honestly,
police.
yeah, I don't know. What would the police do? The police would do the same thing as you, stand there until the parents showed up, right?
Or at the very least, I guess, what am I going to take it home? Like, or just walk away from the park and leave it there while it's getting dark out? I feel like...
Well, no. But
yeah, so
you would
at some
probably
point I
take
should
it
be allowed
home.
to call the cops without getting in trouble.
Put something up on Facebook, baby found, approximately yay weight, eye color.
It's at the park if anyone, if it belongs to anybody.
Staple them to telephone poles, like
Yeah.
found baby.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of that makes sense.
No more digressions. We are going deep.
All right, so yeah, sorry to fill this with digressions. I brought up a lot of anecdotes from childhood and tried to coax some out of you guys because Haidt makes the case, and I think I agree with him, that having unstructured time as a child, and specifically unsupervised time, is very valuable for self-development, self-actualization, and accruing a sense of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Like I got hurt when I was off doing shit as a kid.
That's literally how you learn things.
It's how you learn
not to
things.
touch the stove by poking the stove one point and being like, oh fuck, that burned my finger. I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah. I did that as a young scientist on my very first birthday. I touched the candle. I'm told. I don't remember this, of course, but in the pictures, there's a picture of me ETing the candle flame and then a picture of me crying. And so, anyway, the idea of never having, like, so we were going to go with more examples. I mean, everyone's aware of them because Haidt goes on about them at some length of, this college campus, this professor in 2010 was caught reading Huck Finn, and now she's fired.
Can I read one
please
paragraph that I thought was really funny? Some recent campus actions border on the surreal. In April at Brandeis University, the Asian American Student Association sought to raise awareness of microaggressions against Asians through an installment on the steps of the academic hall. The installation gave examples of microaggressions such as, "Aren't you supposed to be good at math?" and "I'm colorblind, I don't see race." But a backlash rose among other Asian American students who felt the display itself was a microaggression. The association removed the installation, and its president wrote an email to the entire student body apologizing to anyone who was triggered or hurt by the content of the microaggressions.
And,
I think was an actual quote.
It was.
Triggered or hurt by the content of the microaggressions.
It was a good example because, like, it's obviously very well intentioned. And they did maybe... they could have not picked on a particular race for it or something. If they'd picked on one of everybody except for white people, because we can't be microaggressed.
The Asian American Association doing it. So
wait, they made the thing, and then other Asian Americans at the school.
Yeah.
Oh, I gotcha. Oh, I have a quick, just as long as we're towing the line of annoying people with race talk and all this stuff. The guy who, I can't remember his name because it's not that popular of a show, called Kim's Convenience Store, the older brother.
Oh, Charlie loves that show. She grew up in a very Asian community.
Season whatever just came out, 5.
Mm-hmm.
I've been watching it. It's so far my least favorite.
Okay.
Mainly because all of their problems are caused by them lying. Or trying to cover something up and lying.
That's
and
so
then
frustrating to watch.
And stacking lies on top of lies. And like, it'd be great if like by 5 years in, you guys have learned that like, stop doing that and your lives get way easier.
Okay.
But it's that sort of manufactured conflict, right?
Right.
But anyway, the older brother, he's going to be, there's a trailer for it. He's going to be not an Avenger, but he's going to be a Marvel hero.
Oh, cool.
And apparently, like after they did, I think after they did Thor, maybe after they did Black Panther, maybe both times he tweeted at Marvel Studios because maybe he thought he was a big enough person to get a response from Marvel Studios. He's like, great, now you got an African American hero. How about an Asian American one? Which I feel like is a weird way to ask, but it got him the gig. And then people were like, finally, an Asian American hero. He's Asian Canadian.
That lying son of a bitch.
I mean, Kim's Convenience Store takes place in Canada. He's Canadian. He lives there.
Okay.
So
he's not even representing the true Asian Americans.
Yeah. And my only thing that I realized when I was thinking about this was like, I've never heard the term Asian Canadian before. Mm. And so like, I also wondered, do they call Black Canadians like African Canadian? I've never heard that either.
You know, Canada is basically just America's hat, so they can all count as Americans too.
I mean,
gonna get some angry emails from Canadians.
I only bring that up because I was morbidly curious and I didn't know how to Google. Well, I guess I could just Google,
Canadians
but I don't want to.
Chill, right?
Canadians are what?
We're talking about stereotypes.
Yeah, they're super nice. They won't get mad at us. There'll be some strongly apologetic and courteous emails from our Canadian listeners.
I'm sorry you got the wrong impression about Canadians.
But I remember seeing something years and years ago about African American actor British actor Idris Elba being considered for James Bond, and I'm like, hold up a minute, this doesn't scan.
In Britain, they call them mixed race.
Well, now I know. Yeah, but I
That's more accurate, honestly. Like, I actually sort of feel like when we're trying to be all politically correct, be like Asian American or like African American. Like sometimes people are like multiple races.
Well, and this is the thing
and
that
you're calling them the one that they look like the most, maybe.
And that's usually
yeah.
What people do.
I know we're going to be done digressing, but this actually does sort of relate, so I can tie it back in. But anyway, I knew that was couldn't have been the way that they actually called them in Britain, because they wouldn't say African American British actor. Like that makes no sense. Anyway, so but this does tie in because well, I got to start from the childhood thing. So self-actualization through alone time and responsibility. And now that we're all super old, we remember having childhoods probably with many unsupervised hours, maybe per day, maybe just in the summers, but like being left alone a lot. Mm-hmm. And maybe not all three of us. But
I spent a lot of my childhood outside because I didn't have my parents didn't want to pay for the good cable, and I wasn't allowed to play video games until I forget if I was 14 or 16. But like honestly, I think that I turned out better because of that.
I liked being outside.
In some ways.
I was out doing stuff a lot, and I guess what I'm getting at is I would be curious.
I was a low maintenance kid for my parents. I mainly liked to read, and then once computers and video games became a thing, I did that a lot. I went out sometimes, and I was unsupervised during those times, but a lot of my time was spent doing things that would be considered very safe anyway, like sitting in my room and reading.
How safe is reading, though? What were you reading? Was it satanic?
I mean, look at how I ended up. my parents made the wrong decision trusting books to be around me.
How, just as long as we're digressing, all of your stories are really dark, which is hilarious. Like if you meet Iniash, like he's just super like nice, happy, positive person, and then like it's like you just like channel it all out in your writing. I remember like the first time you sent me the short story version of
What Lies Dreaming?
Yeah, and I actually had to stop reading it, like, I think at the rape scene or, like, shortly after, where I was just like, oh, man, like, I was actually kind of in a depressed period at that point. I was like...
Shit, I'm sorry.
Did you... No, it was a great story, actually. I went back and, like, read it later when I was in a better headspace and loved it and recommended it to people, but I was just like, yeah, sure, this? Like, hidden depths. All right.
Totally. I'm trying to drive home my point quickly because we spent a good, useful amount of time on other stuff, but we're going on too long. So the the unsupervised, or excuse me, the super supervised childhoods of today's 20 somethings led them always to have a responsible adult around. And like, I won't bog us down with examples, but all of us experience some form of bullying. All three of us anyway, many of our listeners. Most bullying can be handled yourself. And especially if you handle bullying yourself, you feel like a badass. If you have to, or at least you feel like you took your life into your own hands, or you took charge of your own life, the broadening of what's encompassed under the umbrella term of bullying is things like exclusion. Like, we're going to go play tag, you're not. That seems like different than this kid's hitting me. Now, bullying is still a problem if you're like afraid to go to school, or if you're, stressed out about the idea of going to school. Then
It's
that's
just
a problem.
a really unpleasant environment all the time. Even though I didn't let people bully me because I was a weird little ender child, I still was stressed by the fact that people could try to bully me at any point, and I was kind of hyper aware of that.
I was bullied consistently, but moderately. Like, I never lost any teeth or broke any bones, but I was hit. So, but it was pervasive. So it would be kind of like what you'd call like a hostile work environment, right? Although it's more hostile. You can't even lightly beat up your coworkers. But that was basically school for me. But
there's less you can do about psychological bullying too. Like, if you resort to violence, then you're the one that gets in trouble.
Exactly.
No, not always.
Not always. Like, in my case, I was always the shortest kid in class, and I was like girl with blonde hair, blue eyes, and was known to be like a good student, etc. Teachers didn't get to see the side of me that would just kick a kid in the nuts.
But the kid had it fucking coming.
Probably not, actually.
Oh, no.
In retrospect, I way overreacted. Like, that's why I said ender, because like when I was a kid, I felt like the stakes were way higher than they probably actually were. But if you are the shortest kid in class, and it feels really threatening, especially because a lot of my experiences in recess, for example, was if they would like say, tell the teacher if someone's bullying you, and I'd go tell a teacher like, hey, this kid keeps hitting me, and they'd be like, just ignore it or just avoid them. And I was like, he's chasing me and hitting me. Like, well, just to, I'm not going to do anything about it. Figure it out. So it's like, I'll figure it out. I covered my arms in poison ivy because I used to be immune to it, and then
neat.
Gave a kid, like, I could have given a kid anaphylactic shock. I didn't fucking know.
Fucking serves him right.
Or like if some kid was like starting to bully me and giving me mouth, I would just go right for the nuts, like I said, to the point where like, oh god, I'm going too much in a digression. I just thought this was funny. A male teacher at one point pulled me aside and said, you should never kick boys in the nuts because you can make them infertile or something. And I was like, I don't give a shit. If they're bullying me, that they're asking for it. Anyway.
No, you're good.
Steven, take control again.
I think you are helping teach those young men the responsibility of their life. That there are consequences. To their actions.
That if you antagonized a young Jace enough, then you might never get to have kids.
Exactly.
Yeah. Lesson learned, and your lineage has ended.
I also convinced
it was probably a shitty lineage.
That I was being psychologically bullied by a bunch of girls, and I convinced them that I was a witch.
Nice.
You got to sacrifice just one of them, and the rest leave you alone.
No, actually, they just would talk, and they seemed to think that like people couldn't overhear them, so I would just overhear them like saying shit, and then later I would be like, "Hey, I know what you said about me," and repeat it back and be all creepy, and they were like, "Oh,
nice." I'll power through some of this. So, like, there was the so I brought up the coddling childhood because it carries on into adulthood. And so, if you're a kid and you can always go to a safe, responsible adult for all of your problems, you never learn to handle anything yourself. And then you move on to what we colloquially consider adult life, like college, and you think things should be the same way. I should never be scared. I should never be stressed out. And you're at the same time told these things should scare and stress you out more than they probably do the healthy average person.
Yeah.
And so that's where the untruth of what doesn't kill you makes you weaker comes in a lot. Like, essentially the belief that people are fragile, like so remarkably fragile that reading the wrong word in a book at college can send you into like a spiraling madness and depression.
Or that kids just aren't like smart enough, or I don't know if smart's the right word, but like Huck Finn, for example, like there was a historical context.
Are we using the term kids to refer to?
Oh, sorry.
I mean, I don't know. Like,
defining terms.
It is kind of.
I think I was thinking of like elementary or maybe probably middle schools when people would have tended to read Huck Finn.
The thing is, there is literally a common term called college kids, which I think is sort of telling on its own that we're calling people in their 20s the same word we use for children still.
Because they basically are children. They're dumb. and especially because they're inebriated all the time. But we don't have time to bog down on that. We'll call them college adults.
Well, I mean, I think part of it is also that this is a problem with how the adults are treating them. Like the adults are the ones that are thinking, "Oh my God, they're going to be so hurt," and coddling them.
Or we're going to get sued.
Well, we're fine. I think
or look bad.
the adults are coming around to that. You know, like if this was 6 years ago in 2015, the adults were flabbergasted. They had no idea where this was coming from. But these were the first generation of kids raised with the super careful upbringing and raised online to reinforce all these ideas of like, oh no, you're crazy
Safe
fragile.
space.
Yeah, safe spaces was a term that took off in 2015.
And again, like so much of this actually, like you keep saying, Steven, it was well intentioned. I think that like safe spaces became. I think that started it with the feminist movement, where it was women who had maybe been raped or been in abusive relationships wanted safe spaces. Oh,
hold on a sec.
We have some more listener feedback, and it's
yeah. Shoot, get out of here.
Happy dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you're right. That safe spaces started, and they just sort of make sense. And I don't want to go just too far. In fact, I'll just mention that like it makes the discussion of like who gets to use which bathroom not an insane one to have, or which changing room at the store or something. There is a not stupid way to have that conversation.
Or I think like there's contexts where, like, if it is a group of, what is it, like women's studies people that want a women only space to talk about like ways that they were abused, or like if it is somebody who is scared of men because maybe like they did have like a stepdad rape them and then like a bunch of abusive experiences and they're just scared of men, like it's kind of reasonable to maybe like give that person a safe space to talk about that.
Yeah.
But like then I saw like one of the actual like pushbacks I've seen on social media are people saying like, hey, Tumblr is not your safe space. For example, the person complaining about, a minor might see this sexy like pinup of Connie from Steven Universe, and it's like, well, actually, you're supposed to, I forget if it's 16 or 18, but you're supposed to be 16 or 18. When you make a Tumblr account, you have to click a thing that says, I confirm that I am above 16 or 18 in order to make an account. So like kids shouldn't be on there. And I've seen other people saying, hey, like Tumblr's not your safe space, and also control your content. If you want to, like, if you're 14 and you've clicked yes, I am 18 and you're on here, you have sort of decided for yourself, I am going to possibly see some content that might disturb me. And then also maybe you can like, there's filters, there's you can filter out tags, you can, decide which things you do and do not want to look at, not telling other people, hey, you need to make this space safe for me or other potential minors. It's like, first of all, you're not supposed to be here.
Yeah. And
secondly, like, if you don't like it, go somewhere else.
And that's why that's why I don't follow any spider subreddits. So like, but the idea of, again, always being raised with a responsible adult in the room, somebody can go to and say, they made me feel unsafe. They had a spider picture on their phone that I saw when I was looking at their phone. Like that. I mean, I don't know if anyone's gotten in trouble for that specific thing, but that's the kind of...
I've seen that kind of thing too, where somebody's like, I'm a vegan and I'm triggered by meat. And somebody's like posting pictures of like their Thanksgiving dinner or something. And they're like, take that down.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen a case like this, but I also don't follow this that closely because I don't do a lot of outrage stuff. But, imagine a college campus where, sorry, if you eat meat, you have to eat it in your dorm rather than the cafeteria because it offends and scares the vegans and triggers them. Like that's not unreasonable jump from where things are in some places, right? But I
think you can also politely ask for that without demanding it. I've seen examples on Facebook I had a bunch of friends who were like in social justice stuff, and I've seen different like ways of people, for example, posting like, hey, I get really upset by pictures of like animal death or animal abuse. So like if you're posting graphic things of animal abuse, like even if you're trying to raise money for something, like I would really prefer if you hid those under a read more or put like, a trigger warning, there are pictures of animal abuse in this, scroll past if that's not your thing. Versus I've seen all caps screaming like, you are a bad, evil, terrible person if you are doing this, and I will unfriend you, and you should also be arrested. Like,
I mean, I think part of it is just, since this is a culture war, a war over what the norms of society are supposed to be.
Exactly.
Like one of our norms is that we don't walk around in a grocery store or whatever in sexy lingerie or other, clothes that are meant to titillate our partners. Not that there's necessarily anything wrong with those, but it's just like a norm that you're going to cover up a little more when you go to the store. And some people want to change the norms to be people are more covered up or less covered up. And this is one of those things where like some people want to change the norms that you can't eat meat in public. And like, I don't know, there could be, a norm if there's maybe there's a Hindu around, and so nobody should be able to eat beef in public because it would offend them, or maybe there's a Muslim around, so nobody should be able to eat pork in public because that would offend them. And at some point it is just a war about the norms. Like, you know what? We want our norms to be that you can't eat any meat in public, or we want our norms to be that like, fuck your veganism or your religion. People are allowed to eat meat. Should be a normal thing. And at that point, I think it's just a fight over preferences, right? Like there is no objectively right or wrong in this case.
Well, I mean, I think for me, if I had to, I couldn't say as objective, but I think the best outcome would just be like, sorry, your offense doesn't get to control how other people behave.
Right, but
so like if you're offended by two people kissing, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be allowed to kiss in front of you or at our campus or whatever. So like that's where this whole
what if you're offended by two people like fingering each other in public?
I mean, maybe they're so you're right. That's a good example because a lot of I'm not aware of any campus that wants their students to be fucking each other in public, right? So maybe within certain guidelines, I don't know.
That's why I went with fingering because it's less unhygienic, but still crosses norms.
But yeah,
as long as you wash your hands.
Yeah, I guess what's tough for me is if people fall back on like, no, this is offensive. Like this is the same kind of bullshit reasoning people have been using to oppress people forever. Mm-hmm. And so you can't elevate that to like, 20 years ago, we were all around for the new atheist movement and they were like, oh, that your talk of, unreligion is offensive to me. The answer was like, so what? Mm-hmm. And that was the fine comeback. Like, you're offended. Okay. Well, sorry, but you don't buy my book. Right. This is for everybody else.
Maybe part of it just has to do with whether or not you're forced to be there or not. Like I could see I
don't think that has much to do with it. Like in Muslim countries, you can't put up pictures of Muhammad because that's offensive. And
I think it's more than offensive.
I'm talking about like sort of what my preferences would be if I were dictator of the world and the one that had to choose these things. Like I would say that like
I changed a lot of things if I was dictator.
I think it like is polite to do the thing of, hey, I want to raise awareness for like this animal abuse charity. Trigger warning, there are some disturbing pictures under the cut here, and some like graphic descriptions of the kinds of abuse that we're trying to fight against. So like keep that in mind. Mm-hmm. And that's cool because it gives somebody the choice to see it or not. But then there's, for example, like if you are in school, you are kind of like there's compulsory education, and there's also just like people want to be in their college class, I guess, like not being shown graphic like Holocaust murders or something. And I think they sort of have the right to maybe, again, like politely, not like let's kick down the dean's door and, put them up on a flagpole or something.
If you're taking a class on World War II history, as long as the professor says we're about to see some graphic images, I think that's just the way it should be. Like you can turn your eyes away if you need to.
Yeah, I remember in middle school there was like, that they were going to dissect frogs and worms and stuff at different points, but they gave other students the option to opt out, and I chose to opt out at the time because I did not want to dissect a frog. I probably would now, but at the time I was like, oh, the poor, animal. I don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. And I like that they gave it, it's like you could either participate in the dissection or you could like read the chapter about it and look at some of the pictures, which were drawings, and then like write an essay about it, where you still sort of, maybe you miss out on like the hands-on experience, but like it's still sort of, I guess it's the respect thing again, sort of giving people the right to control their own content.
Yeah, I think, but that's where there's this like creeping frailty among some young adults and not so young adults, where you're in your 20s, there's somebody on campus reading a book with, there was an example in the essay about somebody reading a book about this march against the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s, and there was a KKK rally on the cover of the book, and this offended a student / employee, and I think that student got in trouble. I forget what the fallout was, but like that shouldn't be enough. Plus, the book wasn't even pro KKK; it was about an awesome anti KKK movement. But I mean, so this kind of falls into I wanted to spend more time on each of the three untruths, but I'll power through. Sorry, go ahead.
Before we jump to the next untruth, so there is a risk of, when you find a new thing that seems to explain a lot, suddenly everything in the world is explained by that new thing. So I might be doing that right here.
Everything is a clue.
Yeah. But I think that it's entirely possible and even likely, in my opinion, that this is not something where people are actually hurt by it. This is more an effect of people are being treated like infants. But adult people are being treated like infants. They have been for a decade plus by this point, and this is one of the ways of fighting back and rebelling against that. This is one of the few ways they can exercise power and strike back against the people who are basically their prisoners, who are treating them like infants. And I mean, it was brought up in the book Teen 2.0 that I read that joining a gang is actually a very adult activity. We think of it as immature, but you're basically joining a military structure. You have duties that are required of you when you join. You get benefits for it, and if you try to leave this organization without their blessing, there's major consequences. And like, this is the same sort of thing where people are trying to assert their lives by saying, we can hurt you too. Like this, you've been treating us like children all this time, but we can do something to make your life terrible. Stop doing this.
And who are they responding to? Like the dean at Yale?
Yeah, any authority figure in their life, because it's the authority figures that are treating you like children, like you don't have the same rights, you don't have the same ability to be an adult human as anyone else. And this is one of the things you do. Like he said, the 3 things you can do to get adult rights immediately in our world is to get pregnant, get married, or commit a serious enough crime. And suddenly the system treats you like an adult in a lot of, what completely, but in a lot more ways than they did before. Because like, oh, you just murdered someone at 16, you're going to adult court now.
It's unfortunate that people are pushed to the extreme too, because like joining a gang, I don't encourage people to join gangs. I think that they're usually pretty bad.
Yeah.
But like, I could understand why someone would do it if that is the only way that they could have any feeling of control over their own life, or power, autonomy, etc.
Yeah. So I mean, I agree it's because of the infantilization thing, but I think it's less that people are actually children and more like that they're trying to strike back and assert their power.
Yeah, like I can also understand some of the, I don't agree with it, but I can understand where people are coming from with the extreme social justice stuff. For example, like there's the college I went to, or it's university now, Richard Stockton University. Richard Stockton was one of the founding fathers who's like less well known, but he kept slaves, and there was I think bronze bust of him like displayed prominently that some coalition of students like demanded they take down, and I think they did because they're like, I'm offended by you glorifying this slaveholder. And it's like, there's an argument that like, okay, well, there's a historical, like he also did a bunch of good things, and maybe we could have that nuanced view, but like from the perspective of Black people who keep having to see slaveholders like glorified and talked about as though like these were, these awesome superheroes of the past, that's a way that you can sort of fight back for like, no, actually I'm sick of having like this shit shoved in my face.
I think those are some good steelman arguments. I don't know if they account for some of the behaviors, like yelling at the dean because you find Halloween costumes offensive. You go to Yale. Yale doesn't go to you, right? Like it.
Yeah, although like going to Yale is a way that you can get a job. I mean, like I guess you could go to another university, but it's like considered one of the. It is one of the Ivy League schools. But like it's prestigious and so forth and so on.
Maybe I'm modeling college wrong, but I kind of picture it like a curated online space where it's like, if you come to a Discord or you're following a Tumblr or something, you don't get to tell them how to do stuff because you're here.
Well, don't get me wrong. I think it's egregious bullshit. It's just expressing your power is not necessarily a good thing. There's a lot of blatant abuses of power that people, that's bullying, right? Is just using your power because you can and it makes you feel good. I think this is the same thing.
Yeah, unfortunate result of radicalization, like the reason you might join a gang because the system's broken. And so like it's a reasonable or like it's an understandable thing for someone to do. But,
if young adults weren't treated like children, this probably would happen less, I guess, is my thesis. Because everything goes back to that for me right now.
Yeah, I mean...
There could be a lot more distress tolerance actually taught in school, too. Like, I still am annoyed by how little, like, social skills and just mental health skills are not taught in school because people don't think that that's something you should learn in school. You should learn it, I guess, through osmosis or something.
I think the only thing you should learn in school is like very basic skills like reading and arithmetic, and like if this was taught in school, it would be probably taught as badly as most things in school are taught. And just spend less time in school and let people pick up the resilience outside of that.
There's really useful things to like learn, though. The example of CBT is actually like that. I think that's a skill that would benefit everybody to learn because
but if you force them to learn it, they're going to learn it shittily. If people want to go and learn it, then they actually pick it up.
I think a case could be made that, like, I don't know, there's things I am glad to have learned in school. For example, I'm glad that my school was one of the few that still had a semi-functional home ec class where they had already gotten rid of a lot of those, because it's like the whole, school should be, for training people to work in basically like an office job. So they were getting rid of a bunch of, things that were like, life skills that like maybe that you should be learning these from your parents or something. But a lot of kids' parents don't teach them how to cut a check, cook food, repair clothing. I don't know.
Home ec was such a waste of time for me. It was another recess. Like, you teach me how to follow the instructions on a box to bake a cake. I already knew how to do that because I can read.
So many of my adult friends didn't know how to microwave a bag of popcorn without burning it or fry an egg.
They probably learn after 2 or 3 attempts of trying to microwave a bag of popcorn.
I have friends and like past romantic partners who never learned it because they felt so embarrassed about being bad at it. I guess that's like sort of another topic where
maybe you ingrain the skill in people on how to read instructions and how to no, I mean not rudely, but also how to Google things that you don't know about. Like I didn't Google it. I watched
inductive reasoning type classes would be pretty sweet.
Yeah. Like I watched there's a great YouTube series, Nat's What I Reckon, as in short for Nathaniel. He's an Australian guy. He swears a lot and he teaches you how to cook. And it's all like apocalypse based because we're all at home. So, welcome back to your own fucking kitchen, champions. We're going to make, chicken Parmageddon. And, so anyway,
he's Australian, so I assume he drops the C word a lot.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
But anyway, this isn't the 3-hour podcast. This is the 2.5-hour podcast, and we're past our 3 hours. So I tell you what, I'll wrap up with a couple of sentences. If anyone thought this was interesting, wants us to do more on this, let us know. Yeah, or if you want us to go back to doing like interesting stuff and talking about like cool science shit or something.
I do think this is interesting and relevant.
I'm sorry we got so off track by everything.
I had a good time.
Like I think maybe we could come back next week or something, and because we only touched on one of your 3 things, right?
One of Haidt's 3 things. I didn't make that shit up, but yeah. I mean, we'll maybe come back to this in a couple weeks, maybe not. But I do want to just emphasize, because I want to rail on this a lot harder than I got a chance to. But there are a couple of good virtues coming out of this. A lot of like the terrible toxic shit that everyone hates. Call out, cancel culture, all that stuff. There are virtuous mindsets from which that behavior can arise, and good outcomes. Like even though it is a weapon that is wielded incorrectly and like over broadly, I think way too often. I think the goal is like accountability for being shit. If you're out there harassing people and you're actually doing that, someone should know, and you should get your some turbulence going on until that stops, right?
Yeah.
Like I think the Me Too movement was a kind of fallout of this sort of mentality, and that shit's awesome. To the extent that people weren't insane about it and saying like Terry Crews wasn't allowed to participate.
The initial Me Too movement was really good.
Yeah.
I just got Harvey Weinstein out of there.
Yeah. And I mean, so like there was pervasive, horrible shit going on. I don't know if anyone else loves Kesha as much as I do, but
Kesha's great.
Mm-hmm.
Was it her most recent or second most recent? Rainbow, I think. It was basically all about her manager was one of these Weinstein characters. And it was about overcoming all that stuff. It's great. And she's one of the few artists I can understand when she sings. So, like, and don't get me wrong, I Me Too was great. The one gripe I had with it was a thing I read about people saying, it was specifically Terry Crews. It was because he was like, oh yeah, Me Too. And they're like, no, fuck you, sit down, because you're a guy. And I didn't
went
like
off
that.
the rails.
Yeah.
It started out great, but like almost everything else in the culture war, it went badly eventually.
But that said, it was one of the positive aspects to come out of this kind of mentality. So
I am actually glad about a lot of the raised awareness of things too. I think that like attacking the dean for Halloween costumes or something is like taking things way too far. But I also do remember being a kid and being in a Halloween store, and like every other costume was some like racist stereotype, like that would be like geisha girl, and it was like, first of all, I'm like, that's a chunk, so I'm not a kimono, and like, okay, I was a little nerd kid, but like, you know, you'd see like a thug costume where it's like blackface, and like,
Oh,
yeah,
shit.
that, like there's some like pretty offensive Halloween costumes that used to and still exist. There's also the thing of the like sexy female version of everything.
I love the sexy banana.
I like the way that people just started subverting it. Like, I never actually did this, but I thought it would have
Sexy
been funny. I really
R2D2.
wanted to be sexy Emperor Palpatine.
Nice.
And
Sexy
just do
Jabba the
like
Hutt.
the like
Yeah.
emaciated scary face thing, but then maybe just have like the robe be like a mini skirt and have like high heels and like
Yeah.
fucking fishnets or something. I don't know.
See, I think that's the appropriate way to respond to a bad costume is to, you know,
Yeah,
challenge it and make it your own.
not attack the
Um,
dean about it.
Well, and you know, that was a weird case, and one I don't want to like make the whole platform of my gripe with this stuff, but it's like just there's a way to handle disagreements and conflicts and life stresses that doesn't involve running to your parents or running to the, you know, the staff at wherever you work, or running to Twitter to get a professor you don't like fired or something. Like you can resolve a problem yourself. Like there was this quick example of somebody works an office job. This all sounds made up because I have none of the details handy because I didn't write any of this down for this episode. But anyone who's worn a tucked-in shirt before knows that when you sit down, it becomes untucked when you stand up.
Mhm.
So
Unless you do the military tuck.
this guy apparently wasn't. Or he didn't have that cool thing where it's like a garter around your leg that you strap to your shirt. I had that for my wedding, so I could do all the dancing and stuff. My shirt didn't. My untuckitude levels were perfect.
Nice.
But stand up at his desk, tuck his shirt in, go off, go to the Xerox, go to the bathroom, whatever. Well, rather than so first off, you might reasonably suggest that his female coworker who reported him to HR might have been a little oversensitive. But maybe there's some good reason for it, etc. But rather than say, "Hey, man, you're making me uncomfortable," again, whether the reasonableness of the uncomfortable aside, or they go to HR and say, "This guy's sexually harassing us," and he's like, "What are you guys talking about?" Well, you're reaching into your pants every time you get up. It's like, I'm tucking my shirt in. I'm not
Yeah.
fondling my dick. Like this is a behavior that I need to do to comply with the dress code for the place. I've got tucked in shirt, you know? So like, I guess what I'm getting at is there are ways to like resolve. So like, again, owning the Palpatine, the sexy everything costume, there are ways to resolve these things that don't involve running to the authorities or
censorship. That's like one of the things that I wanted
Which
to
is
hit
another
before
authority.
we end before we move on. Actually, two things. I think that a really bad outcome is that, like, for example, like banning Huck Finn or whatever. You can, as like a learning institution, I don't know. For example, the what is his name? Richard Stockton bust. Instead of just taking it down, maybe they could have negotiated something where there's a plaque that they could change the wording of the plaque to be like, "Hey, Richard Stockton was a complicated historical figure who did a lot of good things, but he was also a slave owner, and we're putting this bust here because he was the founder of this school. But like, if you want to learn more, here's a website that you know."
That seems really Weasley to me.
I like the
how
idea
so?
of not venerating the guy like he was perfect by if you just have a statue with the guy's name and age or date or something on it, right? If you do say, "Hey, this was a complicated figure, but we found that his contributions to the founding of the country that you're living in and attending school in was valuable. Check out our web, our Yale.com or whatever, Stockton.edu/statue for some details on our complicated thoughts on the matter." I think that's not that bad middle of the road option.
I think if you got a bust of someone up, you're venerating them. And I mean, there can be an argument made that along the lines of, you know what, he deserves to be venerated for the good things he did. And in his time, this slavery thing was whatever, I don't know, whatever kind of argument you would want to make. But like, if you have a bust up of Stalin or Dick Cheney or something and being like, this was a complicated guy with a lot of good and bad things in his past, go to this website link to check out the controversy, like, you still got a bust up of those people.
Sure, but I don't
you're
know.
not hiding the fact that they existed, or just saying that they only did good things.
Yeah, and I do think that you're right. Having a statue up venerates a person, but
Maybe
like
that wasn't the
especially
best
to
example.
there's something to be said about like old art.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a very art-minded person, but if something is 200 years old and you're like, yeah, sure, the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia is problematic for reasons X, Y, and Z, but
Is it?
it's someone could, I'm just making this
Oh,
up,
okay.
but like some artifact like that, you know, it's like, yeah, but we're not gonna throw it in the incinerator because it's 300 years old and we like it, right?
The thing I would worry about is that like extreme censorship of like, let's just get rid of books that offend people, let's not teach classes that might hurt people's feelings, actually has the opposite of the intended effect, where you're just not teaching people about the like
Yeah, but that's,
complexity of historical events, and that like you're actually sort of covering up bad things that happened.
that's different from having a statue of someone up, though.
That's why I was saying maybe that wasn't the best example. I was just trying to think of
Oh, okay.
something to use as like a concrete example.
I mean, pick somebody awesome that, you know, again, all of the founders had slaves, right? So like,
I think so.
it's, I mean, if not all of them, the super majority of them.
Yeah,
But,
I mean,
like,
it was
to-
very common for white men of the upper class at the time to have slaves.
And they were all white men. So like, you know, they're the problematic history of the United States by today's standards. It's good that we don't operate that way anymore. Like, that's valuable, but you can't say they were shit people because they lived 250 years ago when everybody was shit people. Like, you know, I don't know if this is true, but hypothetically it could be true. Let's say Gandhi hated black people. Like,
Gandhi
if that
had
was
problematic views about the Holocaust.
sure. So, you know, whatever legit issue there is with Gandhi, you can take the good, acknowledge the bad, but not throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
Mhm.
Like, to throw out Gandhi and all the good he did, to throw out Martin Luther King Jr. and all the good he did, like, if you are holding everybody to the perfection standards of 2021, you're not going to find anybody from history that is perfect, right?
Also, like, what things are we going to be doing and saying that like people 50 years from now are going to think we're abhorrent?
Hopefully, some stuff, right? I want society. Oh, no, I'm serious. I want society to keep moving forward.
Oh, okay.
I think that there will be things that I hope that they are more wise in how they judge their descendants or their ancestors than we are. But anyway, we are wrapping up just because I think we're over time, but we're never out of time to thank this week's patron. And this week's patron is Alex Wyke, who is a total badass for helping support the show. So thank you, Alex. We couldn't do this without you. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode.
And Alex, if you have a comment about whether we should talk about this some more or move on to a different topic, we will triple the weight of your opinion on this one.
That's right.
Yeah.
Ping us on Discord or write us at BayesianConspiracyPodcast@gmail.com.
Or maybe submit a audio clip if you want us to air that.
Yeah.
Or even call in somehow.
All of those are great options.
Cool.
So thanks again to Alex and everybody for hanging out and listening. And we'll see you back here, same rat place, same rat channel in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.